They're not talking about the best of them. They're just talking about the rest of them. Not the worst parts, but the best parts. This is the best of the rest.
Hello and welcome to Best of the Rest. My name is Chris Logan, and I'm joined as always by my jolly co-host, Andrew Williams. Andrew, how you doing today, brother?
Chris, I'm fine.
Fine as ever. You got Christmas decorations out yet, Andrew?
Not yet. I do have a gift wrapped, so
okay, progress.
I have gotten that far. So the single gift that I have bought thus far, and so I got to do a lot of legwork in the next several days. But no, I do have one gift wrapped. Probably putting up some stuff this weekend. Liz and I are planning to go to the Christmas market in downtown Chicago, which is a little known. So that's a plan for our getting in the Christmas spirit in the next couple days. So that should be fun.
Great. Well, I will be checking in on you, checking the progress week to week on your decorations, on your wrapping, whether or not you've tried eggnog yet. So look forward to that as we go through this. But Andrew, we can't waste any time. We
can't.
A special time of year for everybody, but for our podcast. We're doing something a little bit different this month. We have invited a guest to be on our show every single week in December. It is a guest-filled month. And not only that, Andrew, we have selfishly asked every guest to give us a gift. It's the season of gift giving, why not?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah, why? We're not going to give guests something. We're already treating them to being on our show.
Why shouldn't we get a gift?
They're going to give it
after
to
all
us.
We've done for everyone else.
Andrew, to help us kick off this special month, we have invited the one and only sweetheart of podcasting himself, Mr. Bob Buel, onto the show once again. Bob, you've heard him on past episodes. He's been a guest breaking down movies. He's hosted some trivia shows for us on certain anniversary episodes. You know him, you love him. Host of the wonderful 99 Questions podcast. He's back once again. And Andrew, I have a gift from Bob right here. He was nice enough to send it over for us. And we're gonna... Let's open this up. What is... Oh my gosh. Andrew, look what this is.
What?
The 1985 film Clue. We're going to break down Clue with Bob Buel.
No way.
What a gift indeed. What a treat. Andrew,
potentially, dare I say, no greater gift to be given to us than the gift of Clue. So...
Now, Andrew, I know you are a huge fan of this movie. We've talked about it many, many times. I'm sure you've brought it up on mic. I believe it is maybe your number one comfort movie, if not number one, and I'm sure it's certainly up there. But I'll let you speak for yourself, Andrew. What is your history? What is your history with this film, Clue? Is it something that you watched much growing up?
I've seen it once or twice. I watch this movie all the time. I quote this movie all the time. I love this movie. I remember my parents got a VHS of it for us when I was much younger, so we had it on tape. The old reliable.
Oh yeah.
Except that they did wear out over time. So
not reliable at all
the time as a kid.
Turns out.
No. Anyway, turns out it's actually quite an unreliable format. But physical media for life, folks. I'm team physical media. Don't hate. So a staple of my childhood, my teenage years, my young adulthood, my adulthood, my life. I've watched this movie all the time. I can watch it anytime. I can put this movie on and just enjoy. I have gone to the Alamo parties that they've done several times. Went to one in Houston. Went with one with my whole family where we all picked our color and went as all 6 of them, and that was really, really fun. I was Professor Plum, obviously, but probably more like teacher's assistant Plum. But we're not gonna split hairs here. But just a movie that I love deeply. It is a massive, massive comfort thing for me. If I'm having a bad day, a rough time, I can put this movie on. Like, my brother and I will be talking and just randomly start working in Clue references that we don't even realize. Like, it comes out of nowhere, but like we both immediately know what the other one is talking about. Like, it happened literally just the other day. I don't remember exactly what it was, but like literally I said something and he said something and then went, wait, and then backtracked and saw that it was a Clue reference and found his way to the finish. So
is it possible this is the movie you've seen the most? I mean, does it rival something like Ninja Turtles has got to be up there just because you've been watching that since you were presumably 2 years old.
I don't know. It's a tough one. I mean, I haven't logged all the movies that I've watched in my life, but not every time I watch them, that is. Like, Ghostbusters has obviously got to be up there too. But like Ghostbusters, Ninja Turtles, Clue. Like, Clue might have the edge only because it was something I watched with my family a lot. So I probably watched it on a heavier rotation, or at least more frequently as a youth, because can't make my family watch Ninja Turtles every night before dinner or during dinner or whatever. But
not with that attitude, Andrew.
But so Clue might have the edge, but I mean, it's definitely like top 3. Like, if it's, I mean, I don't know what number 3 is. I think of movies I watch all the time and can watch with no issue whatsoever that are like from when I was younger, and it's like Ninja Turtles is up there, Clue is up there. Groundhog Day is oddly up there too. Like, I watched that movie a lot when I was younger and like have still watched it routinely. It's tapered off a little bit now just because of, gestures around. But it's something where I can always go back to Clue. It's something that is always there. And it's such just a strange movie that it exists in this like odd bubble to me sometimes. And we'll probably talk more about this later, but just like, it's oddly like anybody that's seen Clue loves Clue.
Yeah.
But there are still it feels like a lot of people that don't know what it is and haven't seen it. And
well, I mean, that was me until fairly recently. I mean,
years ago.
I knew of its existence, but this was a pandemic watch for me. So 2020, 2021, somewhere around there, I watched this for the first time. I just finally got around. I wasn't doing much else, so I finally got around to catching up on a few movies that I always heard about, and Clue was one of them. Instantly loved it. I've watched it a number of times since then.
Like, I'm sure I mentioned it to you.
You never shut up about it.
How did
yes.
you not watch this?
Yeah, I mean, mostly from you for sure. But no, it's something, it's got us following. I certainly heard about it. And finally got around to it. Now, as far as doing it on this podcast, I think eventually we would have got to it. We've talked multiple times about doing a board game month, but like after Clue and Battleship, it kind of starts to run dry. So maybe you got to broaden it to like a toy month and work in a Transformers, whatever. But you know what? Bob did all the work for us. Because of Bob, because of his gift, we get to just talk about it this month. I want to get to that conversation as quickly as possible, but we got to set the stage at least a little bit here. This movie was released December 13th, 1985. How appropriate, Andrew. This was a holiday season release. It was made on a budget of $15 million. At the box office, only brought in $14.6 million. Critically, it's kind of hard to say, honestly. Looking at historical reviews, it wasn't exactly a critical darling. There's some positive reviews out there, but mostly middling. It wasn't really panned. It wasn't praised. It was just, this is a weird thing that exists. Roger Ebert was kind of split down the middle. But if you look at Rotten Tomatoes now, they are reflecting a 72% critic score. It has certainly risen in popularity as the cult following has grown, as you have more, I almost said revisionist reviews. That's not the word I'm looking for. What am I looking for? Retrospective reviews. Yes. It's only grown in popularity over time. It is certainly earned its cult classic following now for sure.
Yeah, I mean, you like I said, 72%, but that's literally off of 39 reviews, several of which are going to be retrospective. They, you look at the dates on some of these that are listed here, and they're literally from the aughts or the 2010s, or in this case, even 2023. Like, there are a lot of reviews here that are much more recent. Now, it does obviously have an 86% audience score, and that's based off of over 50,000 reviews. So this is definitely a movie where I absolutely expected, like, if the audience score had been lower on this, I genuinely would have, like, weeped for humanity, just because it would have seemed so insane that the audience reception of this movie would be lower than the critics. But the audiences for this one have, it like you said, it is a cult classic in every sense of the term. It is earned that status. It has earned quite the following. It's led to documentaries, it's led to tributes, it's led to art exhibitions, it's led to everything. This movie has earned every single bit of that. I agree completely.
This movie is written and directed by Jonathan Lynn, and it is actually his directorial debut, which is pretty impressive. Not just because I like this movie a lot, but there's a lot of moving parts here. There's such a specific tone that it's hitting. It seems, I don't know. For a directorial debut, I'm impressed. I guess that's all I'm really trying to say. He would go on to find even greater success, perhaps peaking in 1992 with the beloved My Cousin Vinny. Fantastic film. Also the director of Sergeant Bilko, which I've never seen. I just remember that cover from Blockbuster growing up. And then in 2000 directs The Whole Nine Yards, of which I'm a pretty big fan. My man, Matthew Perry. And Bruce Willis is one of his better performances from that era. So a movie that I quite like. But yeah, impressive, if I do say, directorial debut.
Yeah, absolutely. Had been in television for a lot of years before this as a writer, and had directed maybe a couple of TV films before this, but this is definitely his theatrical feature debut. The film is co-written by a gentleman named John Landis, who I don't really have a whole lot to say about.
Yeah, screw that guy. Hashtag PP, I guess.
Something about that family, man. But this was kind of being primed as a John Landis joint. I'm just going to talk about the situation here. I'm not really going to speak to John Landis himself, but in this point in John Landis's career, he was a very high commodity. This was post Blues Brothers, post An American Werewolf in London, Trading Places. 85 he's kind of on top of the world. Somehow, despite Twilight Zone coming out in 83. But eventually, obviously, his career speaks for itself. But so he was kind of primed to do this, but literally had already directed 2 movies that came out in 85. Just didn't quite have the capacity for it. So Jonathan Lynn, who had been brought in to kind of work on the script, or the story, ultimately ends up taking the directorial reins, and we are all the better for it. But like I said, I actually didn't realize some of the things that were in Jonathan Lynn's filmography here, like things like My Cousin Vinny or The Whole Nine Yards or things like that. And then even some of the stuff that he's done since then, which was worked on that show. There's a British political satire show called Yes, Prime Minister that he's come in and out of several times over the years. He's got a whole lot of credits to television. A few acting credits here and there. A couple of voices, usually just appearing as small roles here and there. But yeah, you gotta believe that. I would I would love to go back and ask him in 1985 if he ever thought Clue would become the thing that it was. And I mean, I do believe he's interviewed in the Clue documentary that came out, and I think there might be a commentary that he's just recently done. But certainly got to be an interesting thing to kind of see the life that it ended up having from his perspective.
Andrew, let's not waste any more time. Let's get this guest in the studio and talk about everything we like, everything we love even, about this movie, Clue. Andrew, you ready?
Yes.
We are podcasting with positivity.
In 1954, 6 people are invited to a dinner party by a mysterious host and are given code names of Colonel Mustard, Mrs. White, Mrs. Peacock, Mr. Green, Professor Plum, and Miss Scarlet. Last to join the party is Mr. Body, and the dinner guests realize that he has been blackmailing each of them with incriminating evidence. Wadsworth the butler tells the group that he has called the police, and if they all cooperate, Mr. Body can be arrested for his crime. In turn, Mr. Body gives each guest a deadly weapon, including a candlestick, pipe wrench, a knife, a rope, and a revolver, and suggests that they kill Mr. Wadsworth to protect their secret. But when the lights go out, Mr. Body is the one that ends up murdered. As more people die throughout the night, the dinner guests try and deduce who the mysterious killer is. That's it. Perhaps an unsurprising premise for a movie based on the board game Clue, where you're trying to figure out who the killer is, where they did it, and what weapon they used. It is so on the point, though, that it's actually impressive. The way they incorporate the weapons, the way they incorporate each little gimmick, the secret passages from the board game. This is the template. This is how you adapt a board game, people. If anybody else out there is trying to make a movie based on a board game, I think this one nails it.
I gotta say, I was a little unnerved that you called him Mr. Wadsworth, just because I've never heard him called Mr. Wadsworth ever, even though that's technically correct.
I think I don't even have that written down in my synopsis I was reading from. I think I just included a Mr. there, and then I thought about taking it again, but whatever. He is a Mr.
Just the question is Wadsworth his first name or his last name? I don't know. But
that's the real mystery of this movie.
I will say that the premise of this game lends itself to a narrative much more than some others do. I mean, like, it's a template that works because the game allows it to work. Like, say you took a game like what's a game they'd never turn into a movie? Like, take something like Battleship. Take a game like Battleship. There is a core mechanic within Battleship that I don't know necessarily lends itself to a narrative the way that Clue does. Certainly not one involving alien ships knocking out your radar so you have to blindly fire at each other using grid systems.
Andrew, save it for the inevitable episode of our podcast. It's going to happen one day. Bob,
what are you talking about?
Bob,
There's no Battleship
You're being
movie.
so polite. Feel free to talk about this movie. You're the reason we're talking about it. You have brought it to us. You have brought us the gift. As is this month's theme, guests are bringing us gifts, and you have brought us Clue to discuss. Bob, welcome back to the show. This is...
thank you for having me.
Of course,
Always
of course.
a pleasure.
I think this is your third official guest spot. You've come on, you've been nice enough to do trivia for special occasions, but I believe you previously discussed Watchmen and... what else did you just
Batman? Batman 66.
Batman 66. And now Clue. You and Justin Michael are duking it out for the most guest spots. But thank you, Bob. And why don't you just start by telling us why Clue? Yeah, we invited you on. You said bring us any movie you want to discuss, poorly received or otherwise, and you pretty quickly came up with wanting to discuss Clue. So why is that?
Because this movie rules. This movie absolutely rules. I have so much nostalgia for this movie. I feel like I rented this about 1,000 times, then got the VHS and watched it another 1,000 times. It has one of the most stacked casts of any comedy of its day. Truly mind-boggling. Especially in hindsight, seeing the star power in this. It will make me laugh out loud every time I watch it, which I think is a gift only this and, like, Young Frankenstein has, where, like, I'll laugh at a different joke that I didn't laugh at the previous watching every single time. It's amazing. I love it. I love anything related to Clue. I'm finding myself to be a Clue aficionado for some reason. I was really
so board game
as a kid.
included. Is that what you're saying? Like you love?
I love the board game. There was a VCR mystery game that I feel like I'm the only advocate for on the entire internet.
Okay.
It's got a very cheesy VCR video plot that you have to watch and play the game with. It's on YouTube. Look it up. It's amazing. It's as cheesy as you think it is. So once I found out this movie existed, probably somewhere in the 90s, because that's when I was alive, I fell head over heels for it. And I still am head over heels for it. And I absolutely love it. And I can't wait to dive so deep on this thing.
It's funny you say that. I have no nostalgia for this movie. I didn't watch it until honestly, I think it was a pandemic watch for me. So within the past 5 years, I watched it for the first time. I do also love it. I'm glad we're discussing it, but I always loved the board game. It was easily my favorite board game as a child. As a child who loves riddles and puzzles and logic problems, it made me feel so smart to be 7 or 8 years old playing this board game like with my parents and like being the one to solve the mystery. It's probably still my favorite of least of like the classic board game styles. I love it. I know there's like a million variations now. There's like the Office Clue, and it's almost as many as Monopoly now. Just how many different sort of versions of it there are. But I love it. Great board game. I do remember the very distinct memory of again, I love the board game, and my mom telling me they actually made a movie based on this. Believe it or not, almost like a little dismissive, like, isn't that crazy? There's a movie based on Clue. I was like, oh, that is wild. I think she was saying bad about it. I think she might have said it was cheesy according to something. I don't know if she has any strong feelings about this movie, but for a long time, I just knew this movie existed because my mom mentioned it. Never saw it, never watched it. Fast forward, I don't know how many years. My good friend Andrew here has always been a big advocate for it, talked about it endlessly. And like I said, when I finally had some free time in the pandemic, I watched it, changed my life. It is a stone cold classic.
It is.
Yeah.
It truly, truly is.
It's one of those movies that just doesn't, like, it. I don't know that I've met anyone who hasn't seen it and then sees it, and it's not almost immediately one of their favorite movies.
Yeah, it does have that quality. To nostalgia or not, it's gonna... Because I have no nostalgia for this movie. I don't remember watching it as a kid, but it almost still has that comfort for me. It's still a comfort watch for me, even though it's not something I've watched a million times over the years. It just has that quality. And Bob, we told you could bring any movie. It doesn't necessarily have to be poorly received, but this is this qualifies for our podcast. We've actually had it on our list for a while. We haven't worked it into any of our themes, and then here you go. You're giving us the gift of being able to talk about it. But it flops at the box office. Doesn't have great reviews at the time. It has certainly built up its cult following over the years, and I have not seen this in a theater yet, but it seems like the perfect movie to see in theaters. There was recently a very nice 4K re-release of it, so it certainly has found its fans as the years have gone. Look at that, Bob Buel holding up the 4K. Andrew, I know you've got it around you somewhere. But either of you seen this in theaters before?
I have.
Was it like just like a screening, or is it like a movie party? Was there any
Alamo? I've done both. I've done ones where it was just a screening, and then I've done the Alamo movie parties a couple of times where like they do like it's interactive, like I remember playing, like I had cards for all the different characters for one of them. So yeah, I've done this in theaters multiple times, which it's a blast. It's always a blast. I tried to host it when I was working at Alamo, but I got kind of slotted into the old people movies, so they didn't let me do Clue. They were like, Andrew, there's a Hitchcock this month. You get to do that instead. And I was like, fine.
In your theater going experience, and we'll talk more about this later, did they show one distinct ending, or did they do the all three endings?
They show them all.
Okay, cool.
All three.
Cool.
I haven't run into any situation where they've truly ever at a screening where they've ever just shown one. I think the novelty of it at the time was really, really cool, but now I think there's just this expectation that you get to watch all of them. And I think almost any print you buy of it includes them all at this point. I think anything that's being made to show this now is there. Now that's going to send me down a rabbit hole, because now I need to go to eBay and try to find an old reel of Clue from the theaters in the 80s to see which one it has. That's my new white whale. It came up to my brain just this moment, which is why it's always in my head. I'm like, oh, I shouldn't spend this money on this stuff, but once I spend this money, I'm done getting things. So I won't have to worry about spending more money again.
This is the last thing you need to track down, Andrew.
Then obviously, naturally, the something new comes to mind, like tracking down an old 35mm reel for the movie Clue that I have no ability to watch
yet,
but still want.
All right, I can't wait to talk about this movie, talk about our favorite scenes and everything we absolutely love about it. But first things first, you know what we're gonna do. We are going to talk about the cast of this film, starting with the high point, best casting, best performance of the movie, because every episode we recognize one person who goes so far above and beyond the call of duty that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. So, Andrew, I'm going to let you start us here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for Clue?
You know, your brain tells you that it could be anyone, much like the game itself sets itself up. It could be anyone.
Yes.
But when I watch it back, I can't deny that there is to me, there is someone at the center of this movie without which I don't know that it works as well as it does. And in that regard, I have to give this to the man himself, Tim Curry, playing Wadsworth as my just the way he includes so ever since you pointed that out to me, Chris, it's just anytime I watch him, I'm like, there's so many additional noises here that just aren't words.
Every syllable starts at the back of his throat and slowly makes its way forward.
Got to work it way out.
Yes.
Obviously when he's playing like a true villain, and like I don't know that it comes through much here, but like stuff like Home Alone especially, he's like just really hamming that up. It's almost a Sean Connery thing, where as he goes it becomes more and more prominent.
Like, oh, this is what you want from me? Yeah, I can give you this. Yeah.
And so he just starts talking more and more like Tim Curry as time goes on. But to me, like I said, as I put it, I don't know that this movie works without him, which is so odd to me, because apparently he was not the first choice, or potentially even the second choice to play this character. Apparently the first choice was Leonard Rossiter, who just an English character actor of types. And then the second choice was actually Rowan Atkinson.
Now that's interesting. That's interesting.
Now that
how
he apparently didn't think he was famous enough.
Yeah. This is before Mr. Bean. That's crazy. Because I think it's a different movie with Rowan Atkinson. I think it might work. I don't know. I don't know how he would play it, but he's got Rowan Atkinson doing the famous reenacting the entire film, I think would also be supremely entertaining. Different than Tim Curry, but I think he's capable. So I would if I had the ability to hop into that alternate universe and see that version of Rowan Atkinson, I would hop over there for a few hours, watch it, and come back.
There's a really funny exercise that I've seen people do sometimes when it comes to movies, and the argument will be like recast a movie in a different decade. So like take a movie like Clue and be like, hey, cast it in the 90s. Who do you take instead? But one that I've actually thought was even funnier is they say recast it at the same time. So basically take a movie. And to me, Clue is the ultimate challenge for something like that. The brain would be like, okay, you've got to recast Clue with different people that were also around at the same time. Who do you pick for that? And I think Rowan Atkinson as Wadsworth is a potentially great choice. But like you said, Mr. Bean is 1990, I think, is Mr. Bean. So this is many years before that. And that apparently was part of why he didn't, I don't know, it says on Wikipedia they didn't think he was sufficiently well known. And I'm like, they're going to pay you. Who cares? That's not, why do you care about that? But I don't even know. Is this even like I'm trying to look at his filmography. Like Blackadder is on at the time, which don't get me wrong. Blackadder is very, very funny and would definitely be a reason why you could see him being this character. But anyway, Tim Curry is now to me, you know, people make the joke like you can judge someone based off of what they identify Tim Curry from. Like, do they know him from It? Do they know him from Clue? Do they know him from Rocky Horror? Yes. Yeah, on the same level as the other three I just said, for sure. Home Alone 2, whatever it is. And for me, I've seen all of those things, but Clue is where I know him from. And, like, to me, he's possibly the most synonymous part of the movie. So, in that regard, I have to give him the most prestigious award on this podcast, the Mark Strong, the Golden Orb, as it were, to Tim Curry, Wadsworth, Finn.
Wonderful choice. I've got more to say about Tim Curry, but Bob, let us know. Who's getting your Mark Strong Award?
I can't tell you how difficult this is to choose. There are so many powerhouses in this, and I kept flipping back and forth between them. I have to go with Madeline Kahn as Mrs. White.
Wonderful.
Oh, yes.
Wonderful.
I think she's the funniest. She's in the running for funniest human that's existed for my money.
Yes.
Like, every scene she has in this, the little touches, the little sound effects, the physical gags. I truly, in my notes, I have a section of just Madeline Kahn made me laugh doing this section, which hopefully we can get into here. But I think she's a powerhouse in this movie. And for my money, she's getting my Mark Strong Award.
I mean, wonderful pick. There's not a single person you could have said, probably, where I wouldn't be like, yes, of course. At least of, like, the main cast. If you tried to give it to, like, you know, the police officer or whatever, I might be like, what are you doing here? But of our main cast, yeah, I think it's just different flavors. You're going to respond to different ones. I don't think any of them are a crazy pick. Madeline Kahn, wonderful pick. She is... I'm running through the movie in my head, much like Tim Curry at the end of the film. And I don't know if she, like, laughs throughout the movie. She plays everything deadly serious, and she gets so much comedy out of being so straightforward and a little off-kilter and a little strange. And we gotta talk about it at some point. Of course, her big scene with the flames on the side of my face, which apparently is improvised, I heard, which is wonderful. That might be the most iconic line of the movie or scene in the movie. It's like probably the most famous gif I've seen from this movie is her delivering that line, which is so bizarre and out of nowhere. It's the most over the top her character gets, but it's the perfect, like, climax and pinnacle of her performance because it comes so late in the runtime. But I love Madeline Kahn. I love her performance here. Bob, not a crazy pick. Very, very worthy indeed.
This is like if Tim Curry is magically popped out of this movie, I think Madeline Kahn is, to me, the clear, like, next in line for just how great she is in this role. I mean, just Madeline Kahn in general, just one of the best comedic actresses, not just of her time, but of all time. You look at her stuff in Blazing Saddles. She got nominated for an Academy Award for Blazing Saddles. I don't think people know that. Like people talk about, you know, comedies not getting recognition. To be fair, she didn't win, but, like, the fact she got nominated for an Academy Award off Blazing Saddles, yeah, she's funny. She's extremely funny. And she is absolutely fantastic here. She's got some of the best lines of all the characters. That some of the most iconic, I think, beyond Tim Curry, just her, you know, the flame speech, just anything. She is making the most of every single scene she's in. And it's hard when there's this many people that are all extremely funny people, like, all in every scene. How do you stand out? And she manages to stand out in a huge way against not lightweights. And it is fantastic. She passed away very tragically, very young in 1999 from a form of cancer. But the legacy that she leaves behind speaks for itself. And this is definitely one of the gems that you can look back and just see how good she was. She is absolutely fantastic in every single way. And this movie is the epitome of that.
Yeah. And I mean, not to ruin the scenes discussion coming up, but just to rattle them off real quick. The men are like Kleenex line,
Yes.
The flames on the side of my face.
Yes.
It came as quite a shock to him when he died, which always really made me laugh when talking about her ex-husband. He wasn't a very good illusionist. Another amazing line. Just her offhand get off me when Professor Plum like picks up her leg and tries to put her on the couch is so funny. And then I love the line that on the rewatch for rewatching it for this podcast, when Martin Mull's like, "How many husbands have you had?" And she goes, "Mine or other wives?" Is so funny. Perfect comedic timing every time. Yeah, Madeline Kahn.
I guess I'm taking the safe route here. I'm going Tim Curry. I'm agreeing with you, Andrew. I think it is. I just have to, like, throughout the movie, depending on the scenes, I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. I'm like, oh, I really like what they're doing. I really like what they're. Everybody gets a chance to shine. That's why I think it's not crazy to go anywhere. With anybody specifically, it's all a good pick. But once you get to the end of this movie and he's reenacting the movie and he just steals the show, then I go back to what you said, Andrew. Like, the movie doesn't work without him, his ability to pull it all together, and his character being able to bounce back between, like, the guy that knows everything, the guy that connects them all, the guy that delivers a ridiculous amount of exposition, and gets his own jokes, and gets to be comedic, and has such sharp wit and repertoire with every single one of the cast members. But again, it's topped off at the end with him running from room to room, literally just telling us everything we already saw in the movie, but it's still entertaining and wonderful. Yeah, no one does it better than Tim Curry. Getting the Mark Strong Award. We talked about it before. We talked about him on The Shadow, alum of the show. Maybe talked about him elsewhere. Maybe he has a Mark Strong Award. There's just no way for us to check, but he certainly is picking up one here for his role as Wadsworth the butler.
I mean, we did Home Alone 2, right?
We did, yeah.
So we definitely talked about him there. He's definitely shown up on this podcast several times. Home Alone 2, The Shadow. We have unfortunately not done McHale's Navy, but that's, I'm sure, waiting in the wings for us
Dropping
to
the ball here, guys.
jump back to at any time. But yeah, he's just so good, like, at this, and like this to me is like, this is the Tim Curry performance that I think of. Like, I know Rocky Horror is iconic, and he's iconic in that role, in that performance. I know things like It scarred children forever, but I'm telling you guys, #PP, rewatch that miniseries now. He's creepy, but nothing else is. He's fine. You can enjoy it, and it's all good. But it speaks to his talent that a television miniseries of It that people haven't watched in a long time. His performance and his image in that is still super iconic. So he's the definition, I think, of taking whatever inch he's given and turning it into a mile in a good way, where, like, he makes things stand out. He makes himself iconic. The age-old joke I've heard about Muppet Treasure Island is that, Michael Caine is so good in that movie because he treats the Muppets like actors. Tim Curry is so good in that movie because he just treats himself like a Muppet. And it works. He's having a blast in that movie. Was running into some health issues. I believe he had a stroke a few years ago. Is still out there. Still does shows, does appearances, does things. So it's cool that he's still out there doing his thing. And this is... To me, this is the pinnacle of Tim Curry.
Yeah. And as you mentioned also, not the first, second, or third choice, I don't think, to be Wadsworth in this movie, but he was... Yeah. Here's where I can flex my other DVD just off screen. I got a Clue documentary, guys, called Who Done It? In case my Clue fandom was ever up for debate. It's fine, but it has some good info in there, and apparently Tim Curry and the director / writer of this movie were just old high school and college buddies. So that's why after Rowan Atkinson was shot down, because he wasn't famous enough for the studio, and the other choice was I believe he just passed away like very shortly after they started casting the movie. Was also out of the running. They just went, Tim? Yeah, I know Tim. And he immediately agreed yes. So,
that was Leonard Rossiter who passed away. He was the first choice.
Yes,
he was the one who passed away. Like, he literally dies in, like, October 84. So, like, it's literally, like, right before the... And that's... I've skimmed through his filmography. Again, we're looking at a very different movie if this man is Wadsworth. And again, I don't know that it's good or bad, but it's the interesting thing about this role is that I think you very much could play it in a variety of different ways, but Tim Curry and even Rowan Atkinson, they have that manic energy that you'd expect, because I associate that with this character, but like, could you play it like in a much more reserved, kind of dry way? And you probably could, but you know, who knows? We'll never know. No way to find out.
Let's go through our players here. We have Eileen Brennan as Mrs. Peacock. First and foremost, very important question. Is a peacock like blue? She's like the only one to me that isn't obviously associated with a color, and it's always bothered me. Peacocks
blue.
are
Like,
famously multicolor.
Like, in the game, her piece is colored blue. Like, that's...
But do you associate peacocks with blue specifically?
I do blue, now.
Green. They got blue, they got green, they got purple. I love that, true to the name. She has like this ridiculous feathered, like her coat is all fluffy, and then she's got that headpiece. And the first thing I think of her in this role is the prop comedy she gets out of that hat by the end, where she's so disheveled and it keeps falling off, and she keeps like putting it back on for the fall of 2 seconds later as she's screaming about who's next, who's gonna get killed, who's the murderer, but she just can't stop fidgeting with that hat. Like, just take it off, like, is what makes the most sense. But like, no, I'm Mrs. Peacock, I have to have this hat on. Her determination to keep that thing on her head is absolutely hilarious to me.
I love Eileen Brennan in this role. I think it is so funny, and I think it's, dare I say, a little bit underrated, because I think people don't think about Mrs. Peacock enough or Eileen Brennan, but she is so funny here. Like you said, all the comedy she gets out of just fidgeting with her hat, just the endless like screaming she does, like the, you know, her just wailing around the room. Like, I love when Wadsworth is reenacting it and he grabs her and she just immediately starts doing it again for no reason. Like, immediately does the exact same thing, and then she gets keeps getting smacked by people, and you're just seeing like, ha! Like, she's just like, she's just so funny. She's this fantastic character actor as well. Like, she's shown up in dozens of places. She's in, what is the one? Peter Bogdanovich's Last Picture Show, many years before this, 1971. Gets a BAFTA nomination for that, I think. She's in another very funny, if not slightly troubling and dated, murder mystery comedy called Murder by Death. I struggle to talk about that movie because I love it so much, but Peter Sellers plays an Asian man in it. So, yeah, I struggle with it immensely.
Oof from me, dog.
Yeah, it's, I went back to watch it and I was like, man, this is so funny. And within 10 minutes, I was like, oh no. Oh,
you know how
dear.
they developed that technology whenever Scarlett Johansson was cast in Ghost in the Shell, and it leaked that they played with technology that would make her look Asian, and they were like, oh no, we're never gonna actually do it. They should do a filter that like un-Asians Peter Seller and like AI deep voice is I know the voice, I know it's acting, I know, but you gotta deep fake that voice, and we can
change
maybe
his
fix
face
this.
And change what he's wearing the whole movie. For better or worse, he goes really hard on it. But
for worse, Andrew. For
much worse. Anyway, back to Mrs. Peacock. She's in that movie. I forget who exactly she plays in Murder by Death. She is one. All the characters in Murder by Death are just like thin analogs of like other characters. Like, you know, there's Charlie Chan is who Peter Sellers is, and somebody's Mrs. Marple, and I think she plays like Sam Spade's secretary is who she's supposed to be. Sam Diamond in that movie, played by Peter Falk, of Columbo fame. Apparently murder mystery stuff just all collapses back in on itself. Like, everybody just ends up in the same cycles. But that being said, Eileen Brennan here, extremely funny. I think she is an integral... I mean, they're all very important pieces of this puzzle.
Yeah.
But I think she's a little bit more understated in that I don't know she gets quite called out as much as I think she should, simply because she's so unbelievably funny here. The comedy she gets out of everything. The scene where she's talking at where she's talking at dinner and she's just ranting and raving and everybody's just over it. Let's just say, those are faces I know very, very well from my own life of ranting and raving at length when nobody wants to hear about it.
When you're discussing the movie Clue at nauseum at a dinner party for someone else's birthday, and no one brought this movie up. Andrew, why are you still talking? I love her characters. Like, she's the most... Obviously, she denies that there's any blackmail against her, and she is almost in denial that she has any dirt on her. She denies it the most, and she kind of acts like she's above it all, and it makes it that much funnier when she literally just falls apart throughout the movie.
Well, she's a senator's wife, of course. She couldn't have possibly done anything wrong.
Couldn't have been me.
She has an amazing scene very early on where the whole idea of blackmail is coming out, and she goes, I can't be blackmailed. I've never done anything wrong. And her hand is shaking, and she's putting a cigarette up to her mouth and misses like 4 times as she absently like stares off in the distance. It made me like almost spit out my water.
It
was
good.
so good. I think she is the most underratedly funny of the cast here. Because she has so many standout moments. And again, the little moments that maybe didn't make me laugh the first time, but like make me laugh on the 20th time now. Like in the final quote unquote true ending, whatever you want to call that, where they go, "Oh, the police aren't coming. Nobody's called them," and she just goes, "Oh, you mean? Oh, of course!
Oh my god, of course!"
Like in the most, like, this has been building inside of her for an hour now. Yeah, she's absolutely brilliant. Her subtleties, her prop comedies, her "no, I'm just going to powder my nose." Like, there's a million lines. Amazing, absolutely amazing.
She's so good. She is so good. Yeah, plenty more to talk about in scenes, but yeah, I think she's somebody that I probably definitely appreciated more as I watched the movie when I like aged a little bit.
Yeah,
and I was able to kind of understand a lot more what she was doing, and just it's a very, very important piece of the puzzle.
Christopher Lloyd plays Professor Plum. Absolutely great casting, great performance. And this is where I think I want to highlight that this movie is definitely a comedy through and through. Definitely has comedic actors, but not exclusively comedic actors. It's not all pratfall guys and shtick, and some more than others. Some are, you would definitely classify him as comedic actor, but Christopher Lloyd, I just think of as a great character actor. He's definitely done comedic roles for sure, but up and down this cast, I feel like it's just the right people, because there has to be certain level of seriousness and drama to this at times to make the comedy work, and they find the exact right balance in the cast. I think if you just do like stand-ups and comedians and SNL alum up and down, it's a totally different movie that doesn't work nearly as well. Christopher Lloyd playing it super serious, and the comedy from him is that he's I don't know, he comes off to me as like super pretentious, and he wants to give that aura that he is an intellectual, but he's clearly a absolute creep with how he looks at women, treats women, talks to women, the reason he lost his license, and that just oozes out of him. And one thing, and it kind of goes to the whole cast here, is that everyone is so selfless with the comedy. It's such a true ensemble that no one's stepping on anyone else's toes. People throughout the movie, you'll find examples of them getting the laugh and them being the straight man to set someone else for the big laugh. And it seems pretty even. And it's hard. You get this many people, this many inevitably egos together. It's impressive that they were all managed to fit together so nicely. I also read that they all got paid evenly, which is a super smart move to not put any extra emphasis on any one character. It's really got to be a true ensemble, and they nail it. Christopher Lloyd, the man has, in my lifetime, he's just always been old. I don't understand how this man works. Even like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which I first watched in high school. He's younger there, but he's still got gray hair and looks old. From everything I see him in, he's just a slightly older guy. And even like playing Doc Brown, like they age him up, but it just feels like old man Christopher Lloyd. Like he's just a old guy.
In One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, he's the same age I am now. And yeah, I'm just never going to be a man. No, it's funny that, like, also what's wild to me is Back to the Future is the same year as this.
Yeah.
That broke my brain because I thought Back to the Future, I'm like, it's definitely got to be like before Back to the Future, right? No, it's the same year.
85, yeah.
So it's still before his star power, rockets forward with that, when they're shooting this movie.
Yeah, like before this, he's in Star Trek 3, he's in Search for Spock, he's in one of my favorite kind of cult sci-fi adventure movies, Adventures of Buckaroo Banzai. He plays John Big Booty. Yeah, it's on purpose. Okay. But yeah, and then after this, that's when you get to the Back to the Future sequels, you get Who Framed Roger Rabbit, you get all that stuff. The Addams Family movies come much after this, where he is so good in those, and all sorts of other.
I'm just realizing we have two cast members where my entire impression is a noise because Tim Curry's got that, but Christopher Lloyd, my impression is just. it's just that noise that he works into. He's always
flabbergasted by things.
Anyway, Christopher Lloyd's great. Like you said, he's if there's a sort of kind of straight man in the movie that's kind of trying to be the serious one against kind of the absurdity, that's kind of what his role is. He's not quite reacting to it necessarily, but he's kind of, his job is to kind of be the backbone of of just doing the exact thing that the scene requires. And like I said, he still gets to be funny. Like I love the scene where they find out that Mr. Body wasn't actually Mr. Body, and it's literally wait a second, so who did I kill? And he's like, my butler. And he's like, shucks. Like he thought he killed somebody important, and it turns out he didn't, and he's upset about that. And I'm like, yeah, great.
So funny. Which I think that, if I had to guess, I think that line was ADR'd to get a PG rating or something, because...
Oh, probably.
Yeah,
sorry.
Looking at his mouth, I was like, but hilarious nonetheless.
4214 in my record, Chris, for the swear word. I'll message it to you.
Michael McKean as Mr. Green. Now, I just went on a whole rant about it's not full of comedic actors. Well, here we have a pretty straightforward comedic actor. Michael McKean, I know from all the Christopher Guest stuff. Absolutely hilarious. Mr. Green, probably my favorite character from the Dinner Party Guests. Absolutely hilarious, hysterical. There's something about I'm having a hard time putting my finger on what it is exactly, and I'm going to choose my words carefully here because I think it's revealed early on that he's a homosexual, and that's part of what he's being blackmailed for. And the movie does take place in 1954, where that makes a lot of sense that they're saying that. I love how he plays this role because he's not. I'm not the authority to speak on this, but I don't see anything outwardly offensive. He's not super effeminate. He's not a parody of what it means to be homosexual. But you hear that about his character and throughout his performance, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And not to jump to scenes, but guys, at the very end of this movie, when he says, "I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife," I howled laughing. It is the funniest thing because I watched him for this whole runtime playing this character in such a specific way, and then make that declarative statement. And I'm trying to even break down why it's so funny. Is it that he mentions if he were to be outed, he would lose his job. So since he's surrounded by cops at the end, he's got to keep up that illusion, and that's why it's funny? Or was being homosexual somehow a cover throughout the night? The guy, I don't even know exactly what the joke is, but hearing that line come out of this character after we've seen everything we've seen him in, God, it is so funny. I love how he plays this character. Michael McKean, just what a treasure.
Yeah. no question. Like, obviously, Spinal Tap, the other big thing that I know him from. Honestly, that exercise of like recasting actors, I think literally Christopher Guest is just the person I'd slide right into this role if Michael McKean wasn't available, because like he'd probably play it very similarly. But that, and obviously Spinal Tap is like where he builds that relationship with Christopher Guest, and then they carry that into all of their collaborations together. He's perfect here. The delivery, the kind of understatedness, when he's taking the cop around the house and he's trying like desperately like to keep his cool and
this
like
is
not
the dining
give
room.
out no kidding.
And I love that he just can't lie. Like, he's the one person that just can't.
Yeah, they're standing at the door and he's like, there seems to be some kind of disagreement. No. Well, actually, yes. Like, he's the one's like, he's so good. His delivery is great. He's playing perfectly off of everybody else here. And it's a wonderful performance. Yeah, the gag at the end, that I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife. Like, definitely as a kid, I don't think I understood that at all, but there's definitely a moment where it hit as an adult, and I was like, man, that is funny.
Because I think his whole role in this movie is subtlety. He plays very subtle throughout. Other than the one amazing pratfall that he takes when him and Tim Curry collide in the hallway.
Oh God!
What a bump he's taking there!
Like, they collide at the hip, and they both flip in opposite directions.
Like jigsaw pieces.
That's like a. I've seen brutal hockey hits that don't look that bad, so it's good.
Wild, but yeah, I think that's why that line hits so well, and he has so many funny lines in here. Again, not to jump ahead, but when him and Yvette are searching the house and they're at the bottom of the staircase, and she goes, "You go up ahead," and he goes, "All right." And then
it doesn't move.
Takes a 15-second beat and doesn't move at all. I was rolling laughing.
It's hard not to jump to scenes because you think of like all your favorite moments. Because I love when they all rush to the kitchen. He opens the cupboard and the cook falls out dead. He catches their dead body and just goes, "I didn't do it!" Like, obviously, you're all there discovering this. Like, he's like, "I got to catch this body, but I got to make sure they know, like, I didn't."
I mean, he spends the whole movie, like, I love that he spends the whole movie insisting he didn't do it. Like, there's the one where, like, the body, Mr. Body, I think, falls out, and she's like, "There's blood on your hands," and he's like, "I didn't do it," and, like, rubbing his hands off, like, he's so incensed that anybody would think that he's done any of this, which is just...
And I believe he's the only one who's innocent in all the endings, also, which is like, that's the way to do that, right? Like,
well, because in the first two, it's one specific person that does all of them, and in the last one, where everybody kills somebody, he just kills Mr. Body at the end. So, sorry, spoilers, folks.
But yeah, so funny. Also, quick shout out to him and Laverne and Shirley, also, which I think was probably my first introduction to him, which is like a totally different character, but also just so funny.
He's so funny. I think he's another one that I think is underrated. He's an alum of the show too, from Coneheads.
Oh yeah,
where I remember him. I also remember him as a kid from Short Circuit 2. Those movies have definitely aged perfectly, and there's nothing at all you should be troubled about with them. I don't want you guys to go rewatch them at all. And I don't want you to think about it. I do also want to shout out his run on Better Call Saul, where he played Chuck McGill, and who was kind of one of the main antagonists of Better Call Saul. So if you want another turn where you're going to be like, "Oh, here's the chops," there's the chops for you.
Martin Mull as Colonel Mustard. First thing I want to say, I don't recognize him in this movie. I'm used to an older Martin Mull, who I think has such a distinct look, or had a distinct look. Yeah. R.A.P. Martin Mull. I feel like that look I know him from, he looked that way for like 30 years. And this was like 1 year before that. Like, I don't know about you guys, and I know I'm not great with faces. It's been established on this podcast, but I don't look at this character and see Martin Mull.
It is, it's odd because, like, you think Gene Parmesan. Most people I know that think Martin Mull, they think Gene Parmesan. They think, Gene! I just, aside, because, we don't do asides on this show. I'll try to keep it short. I love that character on Arrested Development because he seems to be the only person who genuinely gets Lucille to show joy. Like, the whole time, she's, like, so disdainful of everyone. But when Jean shows up, that woman is so excited. She is unbelievably excited. So I've always loved that about the character. A love of the show as well from Jingle All the Way. But, like, Jingle All the Way, Martin Mull is definitely, like, that's Gene Parmesan, Martin Mull. That's the same type of thing there. But, yeah, he's... The other thing, for me, it's not so bad.
Hang on. Who is he in? Oh, he's the DJ, right?
He's the DJ.
Yeah.
Not true. I recycle. But I also remember him from Mr. Mom, where he plays the creep. He plays Terry Garr.
Villain. Yeah.
He's the boss. Yeah, he's Terry Garr's boss. And the one who's like a super creep. But I love the exchange he has with Michael Keaton, where he's at Michael Keaton's house at like 7 a.m, and Michael Keaton is like doing demolition on his house for some reason. And Michael Keaton's like, beer? And Martin Mull's like, it's 7 o'clock in the morning. And Michael Keaton just stops for a second and goes, Scotch? And Martin Mull's like, not during working hours. So yeah, he's so funny here. There's like, of the lines that I remember from this movie, there are a lot more Colonel Mustard lines than I thought I'd remember. I'll talk about those more when we get to scenes. I don't want to give it all away here, but just so funny. Of all the male roles, he's probably the most, beyond Wadsworth, he's probably the most prominent. I feel like he speaks and he's like standing forward in a lot of scenes. And he's got this, you talk about how Professor Plum has this like, he wants this air of like of like academia about him. Like he's the honorable, the respectable one. He does it a little bit too, where like he tries to act like this military knowledge he has gives him this edge, but he's still giving this patently ridiculous advice and just isn't making any sense at all.
He's very daft is the word I would use.
Daft is a great way to put it. Not Daft Punk, just daft.
He's not giving Daft Punk.
No robot voices here. But
Martin Mull with that light up helmet. That's the Photoshop I want to see.
But
if you recast this with an early 2000s cast, Andrew, who's Daft Punk?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
the duo plays
the duo. They play Colonel Mustard collectively. We are Colonel Mustard. No, he's fantastic. He is a absolutely very, very funny man. He is just great, and he does exactly what he needs to do here. He actually had a slight music career as well.
I think that's kind of how he started, right? It was like
it is.
Musical comedy kind of deal.
And I feel like there's a logo for a band, a relatively known one that he came up with, and I can't remember what it was. But yeah, quite an odd, varied career that he had that I think is, again, a little bit understated. Mary Hartman and its spinoff Fernwood Tonight. Those are some just extremely funny things that he was involved with. And he's great.
Yeah. I mean,
no notes.
Even like a kind of fine to normal show, like the TV show version of Sabrina the Teenage Witch, like, he's in there and he's great. Like, he's just, for everything you mentioned, no one takes an ironing board off the head like Martin Mull.
I love that moment. He's like, and then he opens it, whap.
He's another one where I didn't remember him having as many standout funny lines as he did, but I found myself really cackling at like when he said, yes, I lost my mommy and daddy in the war. I don't know why, really made me laugh. Like
the way he just says saying the colonel, the military man saying he lost his mommy and daddy is just there's a contrast there, especially while he's also trying to like have this level of respectability about himself and this air of like, you know, I'm the master strategist, and it's like, I lost my mommy and daddy. It's like, okay. Some of this ain't vibing together, bro.
And that like that air of confidence toward the end, it's in one of the endings, I think, where he goes, oh, so whoever has the gun killed the telegram girl or whatever, and Wadsworth goes like, precisely, and he puts his hands on his hips and he like
he's so accomplished.
He looks
like,
around for approval, like he looks over to Professor Plum like, I got it. Don't worry, guys.
I figured it out. Fantastic. It's like you didn't figure. It's like it's a bit like that. That's that. What is that? Sailor Moon, where the guy's like, "My work here is done," and they're like, "You didn't do anything."
Amazing.
I want to take every opportunity to on this podcast to talk about the movie A Futile and Stupid Gesture on Netflix about Doug Kennedy and the founding of National Lampoon. He plays Doug Kennedy. At least a version of him. I won't reveal that twist if you're unfamiliar with the man's life, but huge recommend on that one. And that brings us to Leslie Ann Warren as Miss Scarlet. Andrew, if I were to tell you that she looks remarkably like Susan Sarandon in this movie, are you going to get mad at me, or do you see it too?
There's a ballpark there at least that I'm willing to acknowledge.
Thank you. It's not to a point where I'm genuinely confusing who I'm looking at, but I can't not see it. Look, if we're recasting this movie, slide Susan Sarandon in there. I think she's also doing a great job. I love Miss Scarlet. She's the polar opposite of Mrs. Peacock, whereas Mrs. Peacock is in denial about all the blackmail. Miss Scarlet is owning it. She's not ashamed of it. She's basically running a brothel in D.C. that a lot of very powerful people attend. She doesn't deny it. She owns her sexuality and influence over a lot of the other members in the house. I love it. The pairing of her and Colonel Mustard, they have a lot of screen time together, is such a funny pairing because obviously every woman wants Miss Scarlet, and there's probably not a single person in the house she would want any less than Colonel Mustard. It's like the disgust that she has for him. The scene, I know it's so hard not to just jump to scenes, but the scene where they are going through the bar at the same time, they go, no, after you. But then they stubbornly both try to squeeze through, and the you talked about the beat that the movie takes where Mr. Green is gonna walk up the stairs and he just stands still for 15 seconds. The amount of time they spend on these gags, like they probably spend 10 seconds, 15 seconds trying to squeeze through that bar, and it's just the longer it goes on, the funnier it gets. The editing and directing is just so spot on in this movie, and the time that dedicates to these gags. But yeah, Miss Scarlet, I love this character. It's like a broken record because every character is like pitch perfect, perfectly cast. She shines in her scenes.
She does. Apparently also not the first choice for this character. I don't know if the documentary dives into a lot of if there were other people considered for characters. Apparently Carrie Fisher was like in for this role.
Yeah. She was locked in.
And like had to withdraw due to her entering assistance for her substance issues, which, fantastic.
Good, yeah.
Glad she did that.
They also, just for timing of it, it was 3 days before rehearsals.
Whoa,
it was locked in with Carrie Fisher, and apparently Carrie Fisher was still down to do it, even in rehab, but the studio said no dice, and had to recast on very short notice.
So, Leslie Ann Warren, which is another one, because Leslie Ann Warren, I think, is another one. You talk about Mrs. Peacock with the hat thing. Leslie Ann Warren with that dress feels like another thing. It feels like she's always struggling to keep the straps on that dress up and like just keep the dress on because it just feels like it's falling off the whole time.
Well, you got to think every character is wearing the same costume the entire movie. They spend so many hours in that wardrobe. They're gonna learn every way. I can twirl it this way. I can move it this way. I can trip over it this way. They're gonna get so much out of something as little as the wardrobe they're wearing. Like I bet every single Mr. Green with his glasses. Like every person has like a little tick or a little way they use their the clothes they're wearing the entire film.
And she's definitely one of the most prominent examples of that, I think. But Leslie Ann Warren, just a fantastic actor. She'd gotten nominated for an Academy Award just a couple years before this for Victor Victoria, a movie by Blake Edwards, famous for the Pink Panther films. And she's fantastic in this. Like I said, another character that stands out in a massive way to me. Everybody stands out in this movie. It's just all people all the time. She obviously just had a prolific career as well. Still with us. So one of the only female actresses in this movie that is still with us at this point. How old was she when this came out? She's 78 now, so she was almost 40. Yeah, she's come back and she homages this role occasionally. I remember on Community, I believe it was her and Martin Mull played Britta's parents. And they just showed up and they just went, I don't know that they ever did a scene that wasn't in their living room. So I'm like, hey, if you get paid to just hang out in a living room and mess with all these characters for a while, that's fun. I don't remember if she did the Psych episode. She did. Yeah. She was in the Psych episode that paid homage to
Christopher
Clue.
Lloyd, yeah.
100 Clues. Was Martin Mull in that too? I don't remember. But there was an episode of Psych that played very big homage to Clue. Psych would do that very heavily. There's a Twin Peaks episode, a whole bunch of stuff. Yeah, it's Martin Mull, Leslie Ann Warren, and Christopher Lloyd, I think. And there's multiple episodes in the multiple endings in the episode, so they have some fun with it. But so she comes back and is definitely willing to usually play ball with Clue tributes and stuff like that, and I think that's really, really fun. Because in an odd way, like I said, everybody I know that's seen this movie loves it, but there's definitely an awareness of it. But I still think sometimes it manages to fly under the radar. Like, I'm shocked sometimes at the people I know who are like, oh, no, I've never seen Clue. And I'm like, first off, heathen. In 2024, the year of our Lord, how have you not seen Clue? But second, how? I get shocked occasionally just where I'm like, oh, maybe this... It's that one where I'm like, is it me or are the children wrong? Where I don't know if if it's another moment where, like, I'm ascribing how much something means to me as its assumption is how it's viewed in the world, or is everybody else just lying? And it's obviously everybody else. They're obviously the problem.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I think Leslie Ann Warren does a great job in this role. Her, if she had to be summarized in one word, it's just confidence. And she exudes pure confidence throughout this entire movie. And it is kind of fun looking at it, because I think, with all due respect to her, I think she did an amazing job in this role, but it is really fun thinking, like, they had this with Carrie Fisher in mind. Like, the script was finalized with Carrie Fisher in mind, so it is kind of fun being like, oh, that's why she's so prominent. Like, I think the first ending is all her, and yeah, it is her and Martin Mull kind of exploring the house. I think that's a major set piece, and it's like, of course, that's why they wanted that role to be so prominent. But even that notwithstanding, like, I think she does such a great job. She fits the role perfectly. She has so many great lines. Do you enjoy Kipling, Miss Scarlett? Yeah, I'll eat anything. When they're at the dinner party, amazing. Her facial expressions throughout this, like when they're exploring the ballroom and the wavy curtain, and her eyes just show this, like, pure terror. She gets to, like, play that up for one scene.
Oh, I love that scene too, because they see that they're like, oh, nobody here, and he's like, what about behind those curtains? And Colonel Mustard's like, you look, I'll check the kitchen, and just leaves. Like, just leaves the room.
Brilliant. Also, fun fact about that, I learned from the documentary, that was the one scene shot off-site. The entire mansion was built on a soundstage, except for,
which is nuts,
that ballroom. And they were like, it's too big of an empty space for us to just build here, so they rented some mansion in, like, Pasadena.
Yeah, it's wild, because I assumed this was a house, and I was like, it's funny how this house just conveniently was laid out in the right way. Because, if I won the lottery, I would just take the clue board to, like, an architect and be like, so let's make this happen, please. Including the secret passages. I need you guys to figure out how secret passages from opposite corners of the house don't run into each other.
You want to dedicate 1/10 of your house to your billiard table? Okay.
I would, absolutely. But no, it's like, so when you look at the layout of how the house comes together, like, I'm just like, I don't know where the ballroom is supposed to be. And ultimately, it turns out that it's just a whole separate room somewhere else. So It makes sense.
Yeah. But yeah, she does an amazing job.
The fact this is a set that is built is nuts.
It is crazy.
Like it's
the only ones that are
very much is a house. Like it looks like a house so much.
It's
and there's so much detail and so much effort and so much everything that goes into it.
100%. The furniture is doing a lot of work. They think they brought in like actual legit furniture, not prop furniture, antique furniture. The house has such a Resident Evil vibe. Talking about the video game, like they could use these sets to make a fantastic true to game adaptation of Resident Evil, even though it seems like that's the last thing they want to do for some reason. But the sound of them walking on the tile to like even the dogs outside in the storm jumping at the window might be a weird pull, but I get such strong Resident Evil vibes from the look of this house. But I gotta
play Resident Evil, man.
You do. It's so good. I'm reminded a little bit of The Haunting, which we covered earlier this year, where everyone liked the movie, hate the movie. They're like, yeah, but that house looks awesome. I feel the same way about this one. It's just so ornate, so full of detail. Very impressive that it's a soundstage. I think we have one more character that is truly from the board game, which is Lee Ving as Mr. Body. Who, in the board game, I think they're literally just a card that you flop down. I don't think there's any piece that represents them.
I don't think there's even a card.
No.
Like, Mr. Body, you're like, the game starts, Mr. Body's dead. The whole premise of the game is finding out who killed him. So there's nothing that even represents him. Like,
you might be right. I haven't played the game in forever, but I know there's that brown envelope you slide the killer and the weapon and the location in. I thought there was one for Body you put in there for whatever reason, but I don't know, maybe not. The character's presence is in the board game. They have the custom. I'm not familiar with Mr. Leaving, but he walks on screen, you're like, oh, that's a bad guy. Oh, he's bad, he's evil, look at him, he's got black hair, he's smarmy, he's super pretentious, he's evil, he's bad. I love that performance, I love that air about him, and I love, if you're at all familiar with the game, you know this character's screen time is going to be limited, but he makes such an impression with his short screen time. If I was, I can't help but play this recasting game. If we're doing the 90s Clue, Christian Slater is going to be my Mr. Body. I think it's a perfect role for him. Just looks smarmy. You kind of want him to die quickly. No offense to Mr. Slater. He's great. But, I love it. Again, small screen time compared to everyone else we've been talking about so far, but leaves such an impression.
He's actually the lead singer for the band Fear, which was a weird rabbit hole I went down one day where, like, turns out that he is literally the lead singer and rhythm guitarist for a punk band that has been around since 1978. And still around, still out there, still releasing albums and sort of touring. He had a cut, but it's like a mild acting career. He was in Flashdance. That's probably the other semi-popular thing that he was in. But Mr. Body is what a lot of people know him for. And yeah, like you said, the minute he shows up, you're like, I don't like this guy. This guy's bad news. Like, this is somebody that, you look at and you're like, I am not running to you on the street late at night. It's not going to happen, buddy. I am going to run into that 7-Eleven.
It even gets a little bit of like Weekend at Bernie's-esque acting as a corpse that, falls out and quote unquote attacks somebody or flops to the ground. They get a lot of mileage out of him as a dead body.
Several of the characters definitely get a little bit. The cook probably being the other notable one. Some of the ways they treat the dead bodies in this movie are just so... Like, I love when they open the front door and the singing telegram girl and they're like, well... let's put her in the study with the others. And it just cuts to them dropping the body in the study. It's like, vroom. And that's a line that I definitely like. I will literally be like, well, let's go put it in the study with the others.
6 murders. This is getting serious.
This is getting serious.
That's sick. I actually learned...
one thing I don't understand. One thing.
I learned a bunch about his role from the documentary, actually, because it is relatively small and, there's not a ton of meat on the bone there for him to work with. But yeah, the main things I knew him for were from being the lead singer of Fear, who famously went on Saturday Night Live once because they were friends with John Belushi and started a mosh pit and started cursing on live TV, and that airing was never showed again, and they were banned for life from the show. So he has a little controversy there. But apparently when they were casting the movie, Paramount's only directive was get us someone off the billboards. We want someone with some sort of musical background for this role to maybe bring in some musical fans into the movie. And apparently Gene...
That's so specific and weird.
Yeah, very weird.
That's of a studio note.
And apparently Gene Simmons was close to getting this role from what I heard in the documentary.
Gene Simmons.
Take it with a grain of salt, but that's what they said. And I think that would really color this movie in a weird, different way, because I'm not a big Gene Simmons guy.
It doesn't work. Like, I think I can see his face and presence for some of the scenes, especially when he's alive, but his ego is way too big to do what's necessary for
the only thing that I would say maybe against that is by this time Kiss's popularity had like faded immensely.
That's true.
Like Kiss was
not
like,
in Gene Simmons' mind though. I mean, Kiss is the number one band.
His bank account is certainly still feeling it. Just Kiss obviously rode the nostalgia wave in like the mid 90s when they did the reunion album with the original lineup, Psycho Circus, which isn't actually a reunion album. All four of them only play on one song. But like from like the moment they removed the makeup to like the mid 90s, Kiss is definitely out of favor. So I could see that playing as to him potentially playing ball, but yeah, otherwise, yeah, Gene Simmons, like he's like the last member of Kiss I would assume would do something like this. Like Ace Frehley already looks dead, so like you could have just cast him and it would have been fine.
But apparently, Mr. Lee Ving was not the director was not a big fan of his. And so it always struck me as odd when I was watching this movie as a kid. Like, you could tell his lines were like a little off, but I couldn't quite pinpoint why. And in the documentary, they mentioned they ADR'd out every line of dialogue from Lee Ving and replaced it with an unknown voice actor who sounded very similar, but apparently had a slightly less like Brooklyn accent, is what I heard. But no one knows who did the voice. And on a rewatch, like, it's correct. Every single line he had is either off camera or you could tell is clearly ADR'd in and not his original dialogue. And yeah.
That's nuts.
It's an uncredited replacement of his lines and no one knows who did it. I'm very curious to know who did it, but I don't think that'll ever be solved.
Someone is out there sitting on that information. That's. I wonder if there's like an NDA or a reason.
I do want to also point out that Lee Ving was 35 when he did this movie. So once again, I will never be a man. Ever. Lee Ving is younger than I am now when he does this movie. No, it's interesting. It's like, yeah, like the line I'm thinking of specifically where he's like, it's a hoax. I suggest we all leave. Like, that's definitely one where I'm like, oh, maybe that is, because then I'm like, I really, like, you don't think about it. But I will say it's done. I've seen movies with very bad dialogue replacement. So in the realm of things, like, I wouldn't have even guessed that all of his dialogue was ADR'd until you pointed it out now. So that's wild.
Yeah. But again, on a rewatch, you'll be like, oh, yeah. Like,
you've ruined the movie. You've ruined the act, Job.
You hear the little background hum, like, go away from the noise, from the room. And it's like, oh boy, yeah, they totally did.
You bastards, you did it.
I just love that it's the idea that he was like, yeah, I'm an actor. It's like, okay, well, this is, it's the 50s, it's period piece. You're like, a country club. Oh, yeah, I got it. You toned down the Brooklyn. Yeah, Mr. Body. Yeah, no problem.
No, and it's weird because when I Fear released a new single the other week, and I actually, like, one of the places, I think it's Atom Age Industries releases all the Fear stuff, and I've bought some stuff from them before, and they released the single, and I listened to it, and I'm like, the guy singing sounds like Mr. Body. So the fact that it's apparently not him is even stranger. Like, that's wild.
All right, now we got a crop of
it's
characters.
Probably Frank Welker.
Ooh.
I just assume it's Frank Welker because he does everything.
If it's a voice role in the 80s, probably Frank Welker. Yeah.
If it's an animal noise in the 90s, probably Frank Welker.
If it's Fred Jones now, probably Frank Welker.
Now we got a crop of characters that are original to this movie, like Colleen Camp as Yvette. the maid of the house, who seems innocuous at first, but as the movie goes on, has a more prominent role, and depending on the ending, has a very prominent role. But this is, talk about a supporting character that does just what's asked of them. There's like 3 or 4 scenes where they've really got to deliver some comedic timing or dialogue, and she nails it every time. You alluded to the wee madame line earlier. I think it's fantastic. I think I think even I'm gonna look at I was looking at the Wikipedia page earlier. How do they describe Conley Camp as a voluptuous French maid?
Voluptuous.
Yes.
Yeah. The word
added an M in there.
the word buxom comes to mind. I don't know why. Just something off the top of the dome.
The big emphasis on that.
The big emphasis, Chris. Come on.
Yes.
There's no telling why I wanted to rent this movie so much as a child. There's just no telling.
No, there's no question. Formative character.
Mm-hmm.
But a great performance. There's something to be said about understated is not the right word, but being such an ensemble cast, to be one of the smaller roles, firmly supporting roles, but delivering and showing up at your key scenes, I think she nails it.
She's definitely the most prominent, of the victims / additional characters. None of the rest of them really get quite to work with the
Wadsworth.
Well, I meant beyond Wadsworth, man, because Wadsworth turns out to be Mr. Body. But it's of our side characters, then, not our between the Yvette and the.
I
cook
understand
and the
what you're
cop and all
saying.
that.
I'm just being a little cheeky.
You're not being a little cheeky. You're being a lot cheeky. You were being voluptuously cheeky.
I say Colleen Camp's not being a little cheeky.
No. But she gets to jump in. She's with the main characters for several scenes, unlike most of the other people that come in and out of the movie. And she gets moments to shine. She gets moments to make her own jokes, and then even in some of the endings is one of the murderers. She's an accomplice in some of the endings. So gets a lot to work with, and a formative character in my youth. We'll put it that way.
She
also in Wayne's World. I'm seeing.
Yes.
Here.
Oh, really?
She played. Who was she in Wayne's World?
It's like the guy's wife, the evil.
Oh yeah,
was Arcade guy's wife, the executive's whatever his name is.
Yeah.
Oh,
Miss Vanderhoff. She's the one that's there's something he says that she says that was her idea, and that's she's in 2 scenes, if that.
Good for her though. She's one of these that feels like she maximized her minutes. She maybe didn't have the most screen time
most of
anybody here, but
maximized her minutes, Bob. Maximized.
Listen.
You could call those some voluptuous minutes. That's what we'll say.
But every scene she's in, it's listen, she nails it. Whether she's being the foil or the comedic side of it, she nails it.
I saw that she was in Last Action Hero, so I did a Google image. She is, I'm making her alum of the show, of course. Ratcliffe. She is, I think, a cardboard standout in the video store, if Google Images is to believe. So, talk about a cameo. But that certainly looks like a voluptuous cardboard standout.
Standout is right.
All right, that brings us to Bill Henderson as the cop, which is all he's credited as, but he is the first police officer, I guess, to show up at the house, and the group nervously allows him to use the phone, makes it a point not to let him go into certain rooms. And eventually he does go into those rooms, and they have, done their part to make the dead bodies not look like dead bodies. I absolutely love where Mr. Green is like, you can't go in there. Why? It's just too shocking. And he walks in and they're making out with the dead bodies, which is wild, to make it look like they're just, getting a little freaky in that room. And he says, There's nothing too shocking, just people having a good time. I'd love that.
I didn't know it was that free.
Yeah. Make sure this man doesn't drive home. I'll make sure. We'll get him a car, a long black car.
Oh, a black car.
God, what a quotable movie. It's literally impossible to talk about without just going down the rabbit hole of scenes and lines.
That's the drinking game of this podcast, is every time we just quote the movie, just take a shot and you'll be fully blitzed
dead.
before the end of this
Mr.
film.
Body before no time. But yeah, understated role, nothing definitely the straight man is where the comedy comes from here, but he does it well.
Absolutely. I love the exchange where, he just, answers the phone and it's J. Edgar Hoover on the phone. And it's like, why would you lock me in? And why is J. Edgar Hoover on your phone? He's on everybody else's phone. Why shouldn't he be on mine? Definitely a joke as a kid I did not understand.
Same.
Jeffrey Kramer plays the motorist, the man that is stranded down the road that comes in to use the phone. Ends up getting killed. I think his screen time might be 50-50 between alive and dead. But plays both sides of that very well. I just want to run through these. We can talk about any scenes that spring to mind. But Kelly Nakahara plays the cook, dies almost immediately. Probably more screen time as a dead body. And then Jane Weedlin as the singing telegram girl, who I didn't know until researching for this very podcast, is one of the founding members and guitarist for the band The Go-Go's, which super cool. And this role specifically, for a long time, like I said, I didn't watch this movie till a few years ago. I used to go to Alamo Drafthouse all the time when there was one close to my house. Although sadly now in Houston we only have one location and it's very inconvenient to get to, so I don't go nearly as much. But I swear, it felt like for years, part of their pre-show programming reel included this scene. Da-da-da-da-da-da, I am a singing telegram. Bang!
Oh.
And she gets killed, and then it moves on to, upcoming events. And I was like, that is hilarious. I had no idea what it was from, but I've seen that specific scene, it feels like 50 times. I don't know. Maybe they only used it for a few. I don't know how long they actually used it in their reel, but for the longest time, that was my only connection to this movie, and I didn't even know it was from this movie. But what a hilarious 10-second gag. It's out of nowhere. You don't know who has answered the door. You don't know it's the killer. You don't know how they have the gun. But such a peppy singing telegram, and then you just see a shot of a gun going off, and she falls to the ground dead. Hilarious. One of my favorite scenes of the movie.
She is fantastic. Again, she has the one bit. That's basic. She has two jobs in this movie. One is to deliver that. Well, I guess three jobs. One is to deliver that bit. Two is to get shot. Three is to get dropped in the study. Those are what the character does. But
a good day's work if you can find it.
Hey, not bad at all. Like you said, she is a founding member of the Go-Go's. Was a co-writer on the songs "Our Lips Are Sealed" and "Vacation." Not exactly a lightweight. She was also one of the voices of the Hex Girls, a fictional band that shows up in some of the Scooby-Doo stuff. She was one of those. I also remember her quite prominently in a movie I probably saw before this, but she plays Joan of Arc in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. I don't know why she plays Joan of Arc in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure, but she does, yes. She is the one who takes over the fitness class in the middle of the mall and then implements aerobic exercise in her armies in France. Yeah, just this is one that always shocked me because it's such a small bit. And by this point, the Go-Go's are popular. Their songs of the early 80s, so it's not like she's, I don't know. It's just an odd bit, but hey, it manages to be one of the most iconic parts of the movie, and she's literally, that's the only scene where she's alive.
Absolutely amazing. I mean, literally one line, perfect and iconic.
Maximize the screen time.
Yeah, for real. And a quick shout out, not to go backwards, but Jeffrey Kramer, the motorist, he's the cop in Jaws. I'll never not see him walk through the door or be in the entryway and go, hey, it's the cop from Jaws.
He is the cop.
You just say it to nobody as you're watching the movie by
every
yourself.
time.
It's the cop from Jaws.
It's the other guy.
And then Kelly Nakahara, like I mentioned, playing the cook. I think this is a cameo, even though she dies immediately. She's well known by this time, I think you guys come with the timeline. She is Nurse Kelly in MASH, the TV show, which I never watched MASH. I'm not too familiar with it, but my brief research here says either she's in 167 episodes or 86 episodes. Literally,
it's a wide swing
on Wikipedia.
That is a extremely wide swing.
So I don't know. I guess Wikipedia is not as trustworthy as we all thought, but it's still, regardless, even the section that says 86 episodes says that is more than some of the main characters. So I guess Nurse Kelly is a recurring side character, but recurs quite a bit. So cool. Fill out these small roles with
according
fun
to
cameos.
IMDb, she's in 169 episodes.
That's yet a third metric, number.
So
she's in a lot. She's in a lot of episodes of MASH. We can at least agree on that. There's a lot of episodes.
Yeah, I would guess this is almost I don't know what you'd call that. It's I guess she's known for that. So it's, I guess, a cameo. I don't really know. I don't know if there were big MASH fans would watch this movie and be like, oh. Point at the screen, the Leo point at the scrreen.
Hey, it's the nurse from MASH.
I was gonna say,
hey, it's the cop
I
from
did that
Jaws.
with the cop from Jaws. So who am I to judge? Like,
Cop from Jaws. I wonder if they're all like that. Like all the bit characters have that very famous thing that older people.
hey, it's
would
the singer
know
from the
them
Go-Go's.
for.
Like,
Singer from the Go-Go's.
Something.
The lead singer from Fear.
The remember the cast that I do always see credited as a cameo is Howard Hessman as the chief of police, who is like, we first see him as like the evangelist at the door. So I don't know if he walks on screen and people point and go, hey, it's the captain from Police Academy 2, their first assignment. Like he's listed as a cameo, but he's not like a huge name. Like I don't really know. I assume he just knows.
Also, Police Academy 2 was the same year as this, Chris. Come on.
That's my point, is that it's ridiculous and no one's actually doing that.
he was in WKRP in Cincinnati,
he was in
right?
WKRP in Cincinnati, yeah. He was on that for 4 years.
I forget the name.
He was Johnny Fever.
Johnny Fever.
Johnny Fever. He was also on the Bob Newhart Show for a few episodes, was also on Mary Hartman with Martin Mull. But I would assume if anything is the cameo, it's probably WKPRP in Cincinnati, which I got to get prepped for the Thanksgiving episode since it's coming. You got to cut that, Chris, because this won't air until after Thanksgiving.
Okay, I think we've literally covered every single person that appears on screen. It's a pretty tight cast, pretty focused. We're basically in one location the entire movie. So
this cast isn't at all tight. There's we just talked about 15 people, man.
How many movies have you seen that literally have only 15 people in the entire runtime, though?
I've seen movies with less than that. Like The Thing has less people than that.
Most movies have more than 15. Is this the hill that you want to die on, Andrew? That this is not a tight cast?
No, it's a large group of people.
Most movies either have 15 or 167 people in the cast, according to Wikipedia.
Nothing. All right, well, let's talk about the scenes of this film. We couldn't help it. We've talked about a few, but we're going to really dive in now and talk about our absolute favorites. So, Andrew, why don't you kick us off here? When is this movie just firing on all cylinders? What is the best scene in Clue?
This is another one where I would love to say that the minute the sky appears on the screen and the minute Shake, Rattle, and Roll by Bill Haley and the Comets plays, that's the best scene in this movie.
The entire runtime is
the entire runtime. Nah, cut out the credits. I don't care for the credits. No, it's fine. But
there's cool the playing cards are in the credits though, and that's awesome.
Anyway, we've mentioned it in passing before, but it's got to be when Tim Curry is just needlessly manically running around the house reenacting the events of the film, where it's just unbelievable, the energy and how much comedy he wrings out of literally just retelling us things that we already watched. It's, you talk about how a movie will kind of bore the audience because it keeps explaining the same information. We could talk about something like, say, a movie that, we've seen, like Venom 3, I think has this problem where it feels the need to tell you the deal with Noel like 6 different times throughout the course of that runtime, and you're just kind of like, all right, I get it. Like, let's move on. But with
but you want, whenever Noel finally shows up in the finale to face off with a hero, you'll want to know where this guy's. Wait. That doesn't happen. Spoilers.
Yikes.
Hashtag PP.
Hashtag
Gotta
PP.
watch this movie.
You do not. Anyway, so this is something that could be and if he were like calmly walking around the house, like explaining what had happened, it to definitely run boring. It could definitely be like, okay, I guess, like.
Specifically him running from room to room. I knew I'd be talking with 2 wrestling enthusiasts today, and I made the specific note that I hope is going to resonate with you. He has a very John Cena, Cody Rhodes run. Whenever they have to like hurriedly run, they move their arms way too much to emphasize that they got to run over to pick up the heel. They both do it. It's hilarious and cheesy, and I love them both.
So you are absolutely correct.
How else could
that
you
is how Tim Curry runs
to
from room to
the
room.
cheap seats that you're running? You have to.
Yes.
You got to get your body.
You can't just move fast.
That's exactly what Tim Curry's doing, though. He's telegraphing to the cheap seats. Like, I am hurriedly running from room to room, or whenever. I mean, I'm doing all physical stuff now, so you won't see it. But when he points, it's a big art
And it
through
was
the
you.
sky to do whatever. Yeah. But he's. It's also the way he's retelling, because it's not. It's funny how
he's not
rapidly
calmly
speaking
restating it. Like I said, it's that manic energy that pulses through the whole thing. Like, it's not just in the run. It's not just moving from room to room. When he's in the rooms, he's literally like speed running this information.
And you were there, and you were there,
like,
and you were there,
and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. It's like
and
a lot.
It's peppered with the jokes. Like, I was in the hallway. I know because I was there. Like,
I love that gag. That's genuinely, legitimately one of my favorite lines in this whole movie. And he's not even manic by that point. That's one of the lines that he's actually delivered with some subtlety. He's like, I was in the hall, and he turns that way, but then he stops and turns back and goes, I know because I was there. And just goes
it's
back
so
out.
unnecessary.
defending himself, even though no one's arguing that point.
Like, I'll be walking through my house, and I'll see one of my cats like sitting in the hallway, and I'm like, and you were in the hall. I know because you're there. Like, it's that sort of thing. But so it ramps up too. Like, it starts off with this like. He starts off like he's calmly going to explain what's happened, and he starts off very like, and it's here, and then by the time it gets to Mrs. White, he's in full panic mode. He's like, and Miss White arrived, looking all pale and tragic, and then runs away, and suddenly all the characters are getting there very quick, and he's like, and you had a letter, 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 and they're like, get on with it, and he's like, I'm getting there, and it's like he treats this imparting of information as so necessary to what he's doing, like it's like he can't not do it, and it's so as it just builds and it builds and it builds and it builds, and then it finally builds him turning out the lights in the house again, with this giant switch that you wish you could pull because it just looks so fun. And then he reemerges from that after he turns the lights back on, and that's when it dovetails into the 3 different endings. But it's the build to that, of that manic energy, is he's running around the house and everybody's running after him. It's not like they're all standing in the hall watching himself run room to room to room. You're watching everybody run. And one of my favorite bits is literally just the feet, like just running through the hallway, like just literally cutting to the bottom and showing them all running back and forth and around and around. And he'll literally enter into a room, say 2 things, and then run right back out of the room and make everybody chase after him again. And it's just so wonderfully done. And this is the scene where, like, I can't imagine doing this any other way. So if somebody else is going to play Wadsworth, they have to have this manic energy. And, like, Rowan Atkinson maybe, but, like, I couldn't see, like, Michael Caine doing this. Like, I couldn't see that. Like, something like that. But, like, it's that necessary part of the character, and the fact that everybody is just following him the whole time. Like, at no point are the characters like, this is dumb, we're not going to do this. They also follow him around the whole time. And it's perfect. It's absolutely wonderful. And this is, I think, where, like, the whole movie just kind of builds to this. And that scene encapsulates the entire movie as it starts off calm and just descends into madness, or ascends into madness, I suppose. And it's wonderful. It's perfect. It's why Tim Curry's the Mark Strong. It's why he does this.
It's crazy because I haven't seen this movie nearly as much as you two, but in my mind, this is always like, okay, this is the finale. This is the climax. So we're starting to recap everything. there's like a third of the runtime left. There's like so much of the movie is the endings, and this is not strict. This isn't a criticism. Hashtag PP. It's not what we're here to do anyway. And this movie's perfect, but so much of the movie is these finales, and I can't help but think, seeing this movie in the theater dedicated to one finale, it changes so much. It changes the pacing in the movie, obviously the runtime of the movie, and it changes, this whole gag where we give you alternate versions and a real version is such a hallmark of this film that you don't have in the initial theatrical run. You just have a definitive ending, which is fine, but would you say the movie's better in this format, being presented with all three?
100%.
Bob is not.
I would argue
yes on a
yes.
It's funny because it's such an odd thing, because you hear a lot about like having to go to different theaters to see the different endings, and like my parents were they were around. My sister was born the December before this, but she remembers like that's what you had to do. Like you'd go to the movie theater and you'd see different endings, and but now I think the notion of there being multiple endings is so well known that there's just an expectation that you're going to watch all three of them. Like, I know, like, it was funny. I remember when Shout announced they were doing the 4K of Clue, there were people, I think that was on Reddit, that were, like, hopeful they would have that option to randomly pick one of the endings. And I think it was Chris, you messaged me and you were like, this is ridiculous. Like, that's not, like, you thought it would be, you didn't believe that was a thing until I pointed out to you that every version of Clue on DVD and Blu-ray already has that. That you can already randomly select an ending.
It's interesting. I didn't believe it. I don't know if I didn't believe it.
You questioned it. You thought it was a weird request. You thought it was like a genuinely strange thing they were asking for, to do like to only pick one of the endings. But and then I pointed out
it's a fun gimmick, and I would like to have that on my disc, but I would never use it. I don't know if I'd ever watch this movie and just have it play one of the endings. Like, I don't know what you're getting out of it.
I think I would only potentially do that if I was showing it to somebody for the first time. Maybe
that would be fun, and I would probably do it once. Just like, I want to know what it's like to see this movie for the first time in theaters and just have it stick to an ending and not do this wacky thing where we have different versions. Like, I feel like it changes the feel of the movie so much, and not for it doesn't necessarily make the movie bad.
It's kind of like movie, that,
but.
It's kind of like that issue you'd have with like watching, like you watch Star Wars now, the revelation that Vader's his father. Like, we now know there's multiple endings, and we spent most of our time watching this movie, watching all three of them. To only see one now feels like a weird step back in a way. It's like, well, I know there's more, and then there's one ending that sort of feels like it's meant to be the definitive ending, like the what really happened is literally presented as what really happened. Like, that's supposed to be the real ending, quote unquote. So you would, if you're not seeing that ending, if you've been watching the movie your whole life, or even just more recently, if you're not seeing that ending, it feels like you're not seeing how the movie's supposed to end, quote unquote.
Okay. Is now the time we're going to do the tangent where we talk about these endings and the fact that one of them's a true ending? I think.
Well, you guys haven't talked about your favorite scenes yet.
I know, but you just brought up the endings. We'll come back around.
My favorite scene is the true ending, so I have no problem going on this tangent.
How do you feel about one of them being picked as the true ending versus this three versions and you can pick which one? I think that's a little strange. Another thing that I forget every time I watch it is that the movie sets up that one of them is how it really happened. I always thought of it as like multiple choice, but it doesn't really present it that way.
I think that is a retroactive change.
Yes.
I think obviously when these endings are being presented in the theater, you're not seeing them presented differently. It's not until it comes later that the movie decides to assign one of them being the quote-unquote true ending.
I mean, on VHS, I guess, right? This is how
by VHS. I don't know if the original VHS kind of deliberated original. Like, I know the VHS I had as a kid did, but I don't know what version of that it was.
In the documentary, they refer to the three back-to-back as the TV cut. Like, that was the version. As soon as it left theaters, every version after that was done that way. Included. With ending one, ending two, and here's how it really happened. So I would assume it's everybody.
But yeah, I think the assignment of the everybody did it ending is very much that is a retroactive thing after the movie left theaters. Like, well, because like when you're watching it in the theater, it's not telling you like you get to the end, it's the end. So the minute the lights come back on, you're going to a different ending, and then the movie just the credits roll. At no point watching it in the theaters were you told that wasn't the quote unquote real ending. By the time they assign one as being the quote unquote true ending, it's when it's on video and you can watch all three of them anyway.
Yeah.
So
I think
I don't. It is a little odd. I get why that one's considered the quote unquote true ending because, like I said, everybody's kind of involved and everybody kind of gets moments to shine. But at the same time,
well, it's got like my favorite. Yeah, I talked about earlier, Mr. Green, being the hero and everything, and his great line. But I'm kind of partial to Miss Scarlet being the ultimate villain. I like the way that one reads. But and I will also admit this. I don't think I get it. I got all the pieces that come together. I think it's intentionally rushed and hard to follow. And there's that repeated joke. There's just one thing I don't understand. One thing, because like there's a lot going on here. Do you guys feel like? Again, I'm talking to people who've seen this movie way more than me. You understand how all the pieces fit together in each of the three endings? Does it read
as
for
you? As much as they're
or is it like,
it's
kind of a jumbled mess?
I think as much as they're supposed to, yes. Because I think the way this movie was laid out, and purposefully, was we're going to leave 25 breadcrumbs, and each ending covers 10 of them. So no matter what, we're covered, but it still satisfies the viewer who was like, oh yeah, there was that one thing I noticed that didn't seem quite right. Or yeah, Miss Scarlet was on the ground floor. She would have been able to turn the power off. Or they always make reference of like, who was missing when they run into the billiard room when Yvette was there. And it's like, the only person missing was Wadsworth. Everyone was there. But you don't remember that as the viewer, so they can change your expectations there and be like, oh, wait, maybe Martin maybe Colonel Mustard wasn't there. Like, we're not quite sure because it's just been so long ago and this movie's been running around at such a brisk pace throughout. I have no problem with that one. I think also that true ending, quote unquote, like, if you think about it, it has the who did I shoot? All shucks. It has the flames on the side of the face. It has the I'm gonna go home and sleep with my wife. Like, that's the funniest of the endings, with zero question. Like, if you went to a theater and saw the other ones, you're missing out on like 3 of the best lines in that movie. Great that's shot, true. Mr. Green. And like, that's great.
And it has Mr. Green delivering the line, because Mr. Green, summarizes what happened, but then he says, "But if you want to know who killed Mr. Body, I did it in the hall with the revolver," which is the ending to the board game. That's how you end the board game.
To me,
and that's only in that. To
me, the pacing of having that completely manic moment of him running around, breaker switch back on, Miss Scarlet's ending is like the first plateau, then Miss Peacock's ending a second plateau, and then we get to the third ending where everyone's involved, and it's even a little longer than the others, and everyone did something wrong. The pacing of it builds to that third ending, in my opinion. So removing one or multiple of those, I could see being slightly.
It feels very weird. Like, it genuinely feels kind of weird, which is why the goal now would be to hunt down 3 35mm prints of the original run that have all the endings. So, guys, I'm never going to be done. Liz is going to
just do a triple feature
much.
where you watch Clue 3 times.
I'm sitting in my basement alone watching it against a brick wall because I've been shunned to the basement with all my stuff.
And
but
every single time that the motor shows up, you go, "Hey, that's the cop from Jaws."
Yeah, it's cop from Jaws. I do love in the Mrs. Peacock ending, because like the Mrs. Peacock ending, they do go outside and she gets busted by the cops and they do that whole big thing. I do love the bit where it's like the Mounties. We always get our man, and Mr. Green gets them. Mrs. Peacock was a man, and then like they just
so dumb.
Like, it's so dumb. But like every ending kind of has its moments, and I like the one where Wadsworth figures out the Miss Scarlet ending, and she pulls out the gun, and she's like, good job, Wadsworth. I'm impressed. And Colonel Mustard goes, me too. And she goes, shut up. But
oh, another one of my favorite lines. Who are you, Perry Mason?
Yeah, exactly.
I love that.
So,
that's also
all the endings have cool moments, but yeah, it definitely now I feel like we're definitely ramping up to the main ending. So it's definitely a weird thing, and I don't know that there's ever been another movie that's done that. I don't know that there's ever been a movie that had multiple ways it could have ended that eventually was like, oh, well, they're all here, and here's the one that's sort of meant to be the real one. Now, this isn't discussing that there is supposedly a fourth ending.
Yeah.
And
actually,
and
the Miss Peacock ending.
I do want to talk about this.
Heavily edited, which I didn't even realize too. Originally, she gets shot, not arrested. And if you rewatch it, the way the evangelist cop pulls the gun out, he pulls it out super aggressive. Then they cut to a wide shot of the lights coming on and cops coming in.
The lights coming up.
You never see Miss Peacock again. You only hear her voice dubbed over saying, "I'm the senator's wife," and then it cuts to them and him smoking a cigarette, being like, "We got her." And even when they show the scene of the cop putting his gun in his holster, there's smoke clearly just freshly fired in the scene. But the way it's edited together, you would never think twice about it, but they were like,
I'm gonna have to watch this movie again now, huh? After recording,
the Mr. Body ADR, the everything, we're gonna have to go check it out again.
I'm getting paid a nickel every time someone watches Clue after this podcast, so I'm trying to get it in there.
So we could definitely talk about there is a fourth ending. Yeah. It was supposedly shot, but has never been shown.
It sounds awful. Andrew, you want to walk us through it?
So Jonathan Lynn has said flat out that he's like, it wasn't good. Yeah. He's like, it was not good.
There are some
it was not really
photos of the set.
There are photos of it. There's photos of the set. I think there's photos of maybe Wadsworth outside afterward.
Yeah.
There's evidence it exists, but there's not evidence, but it's never been released. And I don't think this is one of those things that's ever going to be found. I don't know that it's out there and not being shown or what, but so supposedly Wadsworth has committed all the murders, but then he reveals that he's poisoned the champagne, which means that no one's going to survive, and then the 6 guests are going to die. And then he leaves. The officers arrive, they capture him, but he breaks free, steals a police car, and then he gets thwarted when 3 police dogs are in the back seat. I guess meant to kind of be a throwback to the beginning of the film, but those aren't the same dogs, so why would it be a throwback? Because not all dogs, man, but it's bad, and there's a reason it's never been seen.
Yeah,
I don't
say
like
that as nicely as I can.
The champagne's been poisoned, so you're all gonna die. It makes everything feel so pointless. Stupid. Him sneaking around, but he's already killed them all essentially. Right, and I don't like that we leave the house. That's such a big part of this is that the one time I'm trying to think, the camera is physically outside of the house is the very beginning when he pulls. Well, no, when they arrive. Okay, as the guests arrive, I guess. Once all the guests have arrived, we never leave.
Miss Scarlet's car, them approaching that road.
Or I guess the cop arriving.
Yeah, that's about it.
Still, it feels weird to leave at the end of it, though. And
I mean, the whole movie builds to the house, and that's the thing. With Clue, the house is a character. The house is part of. I mean, the house is the board on which the board game is played. It's called a board game. The house is the board. It's what it is. It's a Clue without the house would be like... I can't think of an easy comparison because it turns out we haven't actually made that many board game movies. But I was trying to say it would be like doing Battleship with aliens instead of another...
without Rihanna in it.
I can't go back. I can't go back to Battleship. I already did that.
Clue without the board is like cereal without milk. You can do it, but it's stupid.
Yes, there you go.
That's a John Cena quote that I will never forget. So I don't even remember when he said that, but I always think it's funny.
I do find it interesting that fourth ending only exists, and the only reason we have all the details about it, it's in the novelization and the picture book of Clue or whatever. That's the only place that it still, exists. Obviously not in any kind of film form. I agree with Andrew. I don't think we're ever gonna do that.
Fun fact, that novelization is deeply out of print, will probably never be printed again, but if you search Clue movie novelization on the good old internets, it will direct you to the Internet Archive, where it has been preserved in PDF format.
I think we're all in agreement then that the TV cut, the home video, the 3-ending version is a superior version of this movie, which, I don't know, it's like this and Blade Runner, where like the theatrical cuts are widely regarded as a lesser than cut now. It's pretty interesting. But I think another improvement from having the 3 versions is you get joke repetition that you don't have otherwise. Like the line, there's just one thing I don't understand. One thing gets repeated throughout the endings. And the great line, communism is just a red herring, gets repeated, and it gets funnier every time. It's a very good joke.
Yeah. Like I said, there is, whether deliberate or not, there is good pacing set up by showing these 3 endings back to back. The repeat lines, sometimes spoken by different characters, which makes it even more fun. And just the overall absurdity of it all. Finally coming to the conclusion at the ending where truly everyone did it. I would say it's a superior version.
It's at bare minimum, I think that final ending is kind of how something like this should kind of go. Like obviously the whole hook of the game is one person did it in one location with one weapon. But I think kind of ascribing it and kind of giving as many people here, I think the game is open-ended because it's basically saying anyone could have done it. I think the movie going with a message of, well, they all could have done it, so they all did do it, I think is a fun way to kind of take that concept and take it to its kind of natural progression.
Agreed.
Bob, were you in agreement this is your favorite scene? Is that what you said earlier?
Yes. Specifically the true ending, the 3rd ending.
Okay.
But everything leading up to it. I mean, especially on a rewatch, I love, especially in hindsight, I love how slow the beginning of this movie is. And truly for 10 minutes, there's like 5 jokes. And there's something I really love and respect about that, knowing that it's just this progression over the next hour 20 that will just become a manic fever pace of literally running around from room to room to room, sometimes spending 10 seconds in a room before you move on to the next one, with so much dialogue at high speed. Yeah, everything that we get to in the ending, and everything we've mentioned before, the flames on the side of the face, Tim Curry mentioning that someone grabbed the knife and runs down the hallway with his hand
God,
up.
The way he jumps into frame.
Oh my god, so funny. Absolutely amazing. The Mr. Green line at the end. A really subtle one that always makes me laugh is he grabs, Tim Curry grabs Mrs. White's hand. I'm keep flipping between their character name and actor name just because I love this. But he grabs Mrs. White's hand and he starts running up the stairs. And Mrs. White doesn't go up the stairs. It's like her feet hit the bottom stairs and then she just goes flat against the stairs as Wadsworth goes up. But the camera just follows Wadsworth, so you just see Mrs. White flat against the bottom 6 stairs. It's so
beautiful.
Funny. Even subtle stuff in Miss Peacock's ending, like them singing for She's a Jolly Good Fellow, and Mrs. Peacock is singing the counter to it. She's singing like, oh jolly, oh, oh, like as everyone else is singing the rhythm. It's so funny. Yeah, I mean, I know I'm bouncing around there, but it leads up to that being the climax of the movie for a reason. It just does a beautiful job of building to this firework of an ending that is great. It's great.
Going into this, I thought for sure Tim Curry's manic reenactment would be my favorite scene. But on this rewatch, I think the one that I want to highlight as my favorite is the first time all of the characters go to the study. So Wadsworth desperately gets them all. It takes them a while, but he gets them all into the study. And this is where it's revealed what specifically all of their blackmail or incriminating evidence is. This scene is so dense with information and jokes.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a perfect encapsulation of what makes this movie so special. Also, I get a little angry with how good it is. Upon this rewatch, I compare this to like watching the first few seasons of Arrested Development, where there are so many jokes per minute, both subtle and broad and hidden in dialogue and back to back and callbacks. It's like everything. Like it's so jam packed that it is a little infuriating, but entertaining and fun to watch. You can literally watch this movie a million times, as you two have done, and catch new jokes on
every time.
Your 10th, 12th, 50th rewatch every time. Something else, either you never noticed it before, or it just strikes you as a little bit funnier this time you watch it. Mrs. White is told, didn't your husband disappear? She says that was his job. He was an illusionist, but he never reappeared.
He wasn't
a very good illusionist. That is so damn funny. And I love, and this is again something that reminds me a lot of Arrested Development, is this misunderstanding dialogue and getting comedy out of that. Like, he threatened to kill me in public. Why would he want to kill you in public? And then Wadsworth corrects them, saying he threatened in public to kill her. And as he says it, wait, did I say it wrong?
You said it perfect. Yeah. He threatened.
As he explains it to her and she gets it, he rolls his eyes. Like, I can't believe like you didn't get that. I have to explain that. And that's just, the scene is just full of it. So it's such a, because again, there's a lot of exposition, but it's not a boring exposition dump. We learn all the characters, who they are, what their dirt is. None of them are good people, but we're laughing the entire way. That is like some expert level screenwriting, and of course the performances are all just, we're just working together like a well-oiled machine. So whereas the ending is the Tim Curry show when he's manically reenacting it all, I think I'm leaning towards this one because they all get their time to shine in almost equal footing. So if there's one scene I want to point to that's like, yeah, this is why this movie works, it's this one. It's got everything.
It's an absolutely brilliant scene, and it's a great choice for this. Just as you said, it is, I think it's so difficult to write an ensemble piece like this with, at this point in time, 8 characters in the room, the 6 of our main cast, plus I believe Mr. Body's still in there at the time, plus Wadsworth, and to have them all have a moment to shine. Just as you said, exposition, backstory, and jokes for all of them. If you just handed that to someone and said, write a scene that isn't longer than 6 minutes and has 8 characters reveal their backstories and is still funny and compelling, I would throw the piece of paper away, because how could I possibly do that? But this scene nails it, and has...
And you can keep up with it. You can keep up with the information.
Yes.
And I talked about, the jokes are so fast, it makes me mad. But the important information as far as like the characters, how they fit together, et cetera, it's so you can follow it cleanly.
Yeah.
Juxtaposed with the finale of this movie, where so much revelations happen so fast, it's kind of supposed to be a little confusing. That kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, where like the pacing at the beginning of the film is so deliberate. This slow ramp up to that manic finale is so well done that we can have a scene like this where a lot of information is doled out cleanly versus, again, the end where it is so manic.
I forget if it's this scene or the one when they come back to the study, because they go back to the study obviously several times in the movie. But there's a great line.
There's your drinking game. Take a drink every time they physically go into the study.
As soon as you mentioned drinking, I thought of how Colonel Mustard, when he pours himself the brandy and it's perfectly poured, and then he goes, does anyone else want some? Yeah. And he just splashes it haphazard across the glasses.
That feels like a joke they made up in the moment, right? Like, wouldn't it be funny if I just shook this around? Like, I don't even know if that was written on the page. Like, this would look hilarious. Yeah, I'll put that in the movie.
And Wadsworth has a great line when he's talking about his wife's tragic backstory and all this stuff. And he goes, she had friends that were, he takes this really dramatic beat and he goes, socialists. And then they cut to the room and everyone's like, oh, like aghast and feels so bad for him. And I think he goes, everyone makes mistakes. So,
talk about jokes you don't understand as a kid or get
Absolutely
why
not.
at all. It's supposed to be funny.
it's so funny, especially on a rewatch. Yeah, I mean, I can't find any fault in your argument on that. That's such a great scene.
No, I think this is a great pick. I think it's easy to kind of look at the manic energy of the Tim Curry reenactment stuff and kind of see that as like an easy high point. But this really is like when the movie starts, like this scene here. Like this is when like all of the players are here. The dinner scene before this is funny. Don't get me wrong. Like it's there's a lot of kind of, that's where the more kind of subtle information about the characters is revealed. Maybe a little bit about who they are. Maybe the kind of real introduction that there's maybe a little bit more going on here than we realize. And then obviously the study scene is, like I said, that's where it like kicks into overdrive. That's where all the cards are put on the table. We kind of figure out what we're sitting with here, and the way, like I said, that they managed to kind of reveal so much information in a way that is entertaining, that is still funny, and still manages, like you say, set up the rest of the movie, I think is no small feat. Because it'd be real easy for all this information to come across really flat and just not be super interesting. But this movie manages to be like, you know what, we're going to do it, but it's going to be really funny. You're going to get more insight into the characters. And I think that's a great balance by like using the blackmail as a way to kind of get the insight into the characters. As they say, the eyes are the windows of your skull. It's how you figure out what people are. It's great. It is, or maybe it was Winston Churchill who said the eyes are the windows of your face. But anyway, this is a great scene. I think this is a good pick. I think it's a little bit of an underrated pick.
And I just want to say, Dwight Schrute said the eyes are the groin of your face, just to round out our quote.
Yeah, but he's not real. Anyway, anyway, I think this is an underrated pick. I think these scenes in the study kind of is like the lead room of the movie. Like it's where a lot of stuff happens. It's fantastic. I think this is a great pick. I think this, as you kind of learn all about these characters, like you said, you mentioned Mrs. Peacock earlier, just like I haven't done anything wrong. And like the way she's so like manically saying it and insisting that she's innocent because she's all about appearances, because she's the senator's wife and she's used to entertaining people and she's used to being the proper one. And like this idea that like she could be blackmailed just completely hurts her standing. And she's all about appearances. That's why she wears this ornate, ridiculous outfit that the thing keeps falling off her head. It is great. It is wonderful, and I think this is a good pick, Chris.
I love that the movie opens, again, with them arriving, and like one of, if not the very first thing we see, is Tim Curry's arrival. And as he's walking up, he steps in dog poop. And like he checks his shoe, he smells something, he scrapes it before he walks in. And as every character arrives, there's at least one scene where you see them sniffing and looking around because they also smell something. This is great because it's just a funny joke early on where we're not getting peppered with jokes. This is like one of the few jokes in the beginning. But also thematically, Wadsworth has stepped in shit as he arrives at his dinner party. And every character, from the moment they walk in, they smell something funny, right? They smell that something's up. So like thematically, we're having fun here, but also poop is funny and just smelling something bad is just the joke. So, friend of the show, past and future guest, Justin Michael used the term a load-bearing joke at one time, and I've thought about it a lot since then. I would consider this a load-bearing joke where it's telling you something and it's just funny.
Right. And it shows that this movie is capable of every kind of humor. There is going to be a pratfall. There is going to be a poop joke. There is going to be a really well-crafted, worded joke. There's everything here. There's everything.
When Wadsworth steps out because the dogs are barking and says, "Sit," and then Mr. Green sits down on the bench.
Yeah, so good. So good. Are we just talking general stuff now?
Yeah.
So we're at,
Yeah.
Okay. I mentioned Colonel Mustard. There's the sequence where they're talking about, like, it's this whole sequence where he's talking to Tim Curry and he's like, is there anyone else in the house? Yes or no? And
Oh
they
my
just
God.
Is there any confusion or anyone
is there anybody else in the house?
house?
Either or both. It's this needlessly pedantic, ridiculous scene where
It's
Colonel
like a
Mustard
who's
is
on
literally
first
just,
level dialogue
like
exchange.
just trying to understand if there's anybody else in the house. He's like, "Am I correct in assuming there isn't anybody else in this house?" And he goes, "No." And he's like, "No, so there is somebody else in the house." He goes, "No, I said no, meaning yes." And he's like, "So no, there is or no, there isn't." Like it's this endless back and forth. Mrs. White smashes a glass at one point and goes, "Please." And they do the whole like. It's like, shouldn't we get that guy out of here before he figures out something's going on here? It's like, how are we supposed to throw him outside in this weather? It's like, we throw him outside in this weather, he may get suspicious. We leave him in there, he may get even more suspicious. If I were him, I'd be suspicious already. Like, it's just this endless cacophony this is building. And I love two lines Colonel Mustard has because Mrs. Peacock at one point says split up, and she's like terrified at the notion of splitting up. And Colonel Mustard just goes, "This is war, Peacock!" Like he just like screams it for some reason. And then another line of Colonel Mustard's that I love is when they're arguing about the key that they use to lock the weapons up. And like he locks it and he puts the keys, like, "Where are you putting the keys?" Like, "I'm putting it in my pocket." And he's like, "Why?" "So I know where it is." And they're like, "Unless you're the murderer." And they go back and forth and they argue about this. And then it kind of culminates with like, "But what if you're the murderer?" And he goes, "But I'm not." And Colonel Mustard goes, "But what if you are?" Like the emphasis. The choice of emphasis on the words in that statement kills me every time.
So funny.
There's-
Even elaborating on
I
that.
literally
Oh, I'm sorry, Chris, but even elaborating on that, the one where he goes, "This is war, Peacock." The line that always cracks me up is he goes, "You can't make an omelet without breaking any eggs. Ask any chef, and they'll tell you that."
But look what happened
And
to
look
the
what
cook.
happened to the cook.
She just starts
So
bawling.
Funny.
I literally couldn't write notes fast. I want to write down every dialogue exchange that is funny, but like they're so dense and come so often that I would miss stuff. So I couldn't even like get it all down. At some point, it's like I just enjoy this movie, and I retain enough to be able to talk about it when we record the podcast. But like, there's the exchange where. And again, I don't even remember who all is in the exchange, but they're trying to catch him in a lie because he uses a double negative, and it ultimately leads to Wadsworth saying the double negative has led to proof positive, that's the like Arrested Development style dialogue that really struck me on this watch. Or
It's like those writerly kind of jokes, those jokes that are as funny on paper as they are being delivered.
yes. One we alluded to earlier is Mrs. Peacock saying, "Is there a little girl's room?" And the maid says, "Oui, madame." She goes, "Oh, no, I just need to powder my nose." Like it's the most base. Oh yeah, like elementary school joke, but it's just delivered perfectly and it's hilarious. I love Tim Curry, getting all worked up and like, "Stop shouting! I'm not shouting. All right, I am. I'm shouting.
The candlestick gets him, and he takes the perfect pratfall, like the perfect face bump.
Boom,
Yes.
boom. Like just, I love when the lights go out and everybody's fumbling around the house, and Mrs. Peacock starts fighting with the furnace, and like Colonel Mustard or Professor Plum lights his match, but it's too short and it burns his fingers. Colonel Mustard, I think, hides under the billiard room table. Like he dives under and hides under. Mrs. White gets freaked out by a jack-in-the-box. Why is there a jack-in-the-box in this room that went off? Who knows? I love that Tim Curry like is fumbling around and he goes, "What's this? Another door?" and turns it on and it's a shower that just sprays him for some reason.
That was my favorite scene as a kid because it's pure perfect comedy. And I can appreciate it even more now because it is shot so well. Because it's pitch dark, but there's never a question. As soon as the water comes on, like they have that little accent lighting of it covering the water. Oh, it's brilliant.
Yep. And then he's wet running through the rest of the house. The
Every
rest of the movie,
ending,
he's wet
sopping.
basically. Imagine having to be Tim Curry the rest of this movie and like, all right, we're gonna do another take. Wait. Let's re-moisturize Curry, please. Like, let's. Someone just has to walk over and spray him down again. But He's got to have more water on the face, guys. But
the movie, the pacing is just so much. I think of like the art of stand up as like building, knock it down, then you got to build it up again. This movie escalates their jokes to a climax, and then we start all over and do it again, and it does it again and again and again. I love Colonel Mustard and Miss Scarlet. I'm just squinting to make sure I get all my names right. I think it's after they discover a body after going through a passage, and then they try to run back into the main hall, but it's locked, so they're banging on the door. So everybody else in the house runs up to the door and says, let us in, and they respond, let us out, let us out. It's like the movie is like a musical for 2 seconds, like with that call and response, but it is it's perfect. It's so good.
I love Wadsworth at the very beginning when he's in the dining room. I think it's Colonel Mustard who asks him, so what do you do around here? He goes, I'm a butler. He goes, what does that mean? He goes, I buttle, sir. So stupid.
So ridiculous. This whole movie is just so good. Like, you could literally go almost like line by line. Mr. Body's body gets gone.
Oh, yep.
That one's so good.
Nothing to note here. 2 corpses. Everything's all right.
2 corpses. Everything's fine.
And I love the group reaction when they discover the maid. Oh. They all walk in silently. They take it in, and dejected, they just turn around and walk out. Like it's just another one. It's so good. I'm in awe of the group acting, the group response, them all turning their head in synchronization or running down the hall together. Like, they're acting like as one, like the group kind of like becomes a character. Like, if it would be a cop out, and I have too much respect for the Mark Strong Award to have done it, but if there's ever a movie where you could give the Mark Strong Award to the ensemble, to like the power of them united, like it's this one. They all make each other better.
Yeah.
We haven't talked about 1 + 2 + 1 + 1, have we?
1 + 2 + 2 + 1. No, 1 + 2 + 1 + 1.
It's on your.
But it wouldn't be 1
notes,
+ 1 + 2
Even
+
if what
1.
you're saying is true.
I love this scene.
1 + 1 + 2. It's like
no. It's like there was one. He was like, there was 1 for this, 2 for the 2 for the chandelier, and it's like that's not 6. 1 + 2, 1 + 1 + 2 + 1. Or 1 + 2 + 2 + 1. It's just like no. Even if you were right, it'd be 1 + 1 + 2 + 1, not 1 + 2 + 1 + 1. And she's like, that's right. Shut up.
1 bullet left in this gun, and it's for you.
I love the gag. I love the gag when Colonel Mustard keeps getting scared by the chandelier, like because it happens once during the movie, and then I think it happens in the Miss Scarlet ending too, because he has that one where he's like, he's like, they shoot open the doors to the lounge, and he's like, I've been shot. He's like joking. He's like, you could have killed us. I could have been killed. I can't take any more scares. And then snap, boom, and he's like, oh, and he like collapses into the chair. And then later on, he's like, as I was telling you, there's no bullets left in this gun, you see, and he fires it, and they're like 1 + 2 + 1, and you realize Miss Scarlet was correct about the number of bullets being shot. 1 + 2 + 1 + 1 + 1 is, and then it falls, and it's like Colonel Mustard standing there, and you see it hit right behind him, and it cuts right at that moment, and I'm like, oh, imagine if that was the end of the movie for you, though, because it would have been in one of the endings.
It's weird. It feels weird to think about that being like the definitive.
But it's clearly a callback to that earlier gag. So I'm like, does that work in a vacuum if you don't know there's other endings? Maybe it does.
Also,
I don't know.
Maybe that's why it didn't perform that well in theaters. Like, people left those endings being like, yeah, this is good. This is fine. But I'm not loving it enough to go see the other one, because the denouement, if I could use an SAT word, of having all 3 there just really just makes so much more of an impact.
Do you guys know how, like, it was a known thing there were multiple endings? Like, it was
in
known
the commercials, it was in
gimmick.
The newspaper ads, like everything, yeah.
That's what I was going to ask. How did people know? Because I think it would have been interesting to not reveal it and until, like, you see the movie, a friend sees the movie, and talking about it. Yeah, and how about that ending? Where's Miss Scarlet? And they go, what? It wasn't her. Like, it was everybody or whatever. That would have been interesting, although I don't think you sell any tickets doing that. So I think the right thing is to reveal it. But then, like, you've got a movie based on a board game with a marketing gimmick. I can see how that would be like, well, I'm not going to take this thing seriously. I'm not saying that's why it failed, whatever, but that's interesting. So it was in the commercials. What did they say? Like, see it multiple times to see all the different endings? Or
they said what ending depends on what theater you're at. And then in the documentary, especially, they showed like newspaper advertisements at the time, and it was like, oh, if you go to AMC 12 on this road, it's going to be ending A. And if you go to, Cinemark number B or whatever, you see ending B. So yeah, they would, space out the endings in different theaters in your area.
That's fun.
Didn't
a lot of work.
A lot of work.
I'm curious if there was I'm curious how they determined if there was any determination or if it was just completely random at who got what endings.
Fair question.
Would you have been able to see, I'd be curious, what if the entire city of Minneapolis only got ending A? It's like you keep going to see it and you're like, this is the same ending. This is garbage.
Was there a rare ending? Like the ending where they all did it's the shiny ending. It's only in 20 cinemas across the country.
I wonder if it was did theaters get multiple reels and they showed different ones at different times? That's the question.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing the documentary didn't ask this, so I got to say I'm not interested in buying it.
I can't fault you.
It's not answering my specific question. But no, that'd be as I remember my parents would talk about that. They were like, because I guess they saw the ads or whatever that it was different endings, and I'm like, well, that's a little strange. I got to wonder how that breakdown went. If they just created the same amount of reels for every end, did every theater get 3 reels basically, and was like, all right, here's all 3 endings. Do it at your.
Well, I think based on the newspaper ad,
did the lazy
go to this theater.
Did the lazy theaters only show the same ending despite having the other 2? Did they?
Good question. This is only going to get solved when we get 3 35mm reels of Clue. And
all right, guys, I'm on the hunt.
So there are obviously most projectors are digital now, but presumably there's reels with the triple ending with the TV cut. When was that made? Was that made for special screenings?
I would assume it was later, yeah.
Yeah, after the initial run, after the home release, after it picked up a little bit of a cult following, they said, well, probably 90s or 2000s when actually putting something back in theaters made sense. Financially, it was like, yeah, this seems like a good idea.
I would actually be curious if there are 35mm prints that have all of them, because I don't know. Because the title cards between them, all of that has to come when it hits video or goes to TV, which means you would then need to create reels based off of that. So there might not be genuine 35mm reels, because I've seen some places that will show Clue in 35mm, so I might have to actually just see if somebody showed it. Because hypothetically, I would assume you could create one, sort of. If you have all of them, you could cut it together.
But you need the title cards.
But you wouldn't have the title cards. It would just be continuous. So that's... Again, there's only one way to find this out. I have to get reels of all 3 movies, and then one later that has all the endings. I'm up to 4 reels for one movie, guys. This is terrible.
Last 2 things I did want to... Maybe 3. I did want to shout out the music. I need to take a second to talk about the music, because realistically, there's only 4 songs in the whole movie. It's the fantastic title theme that just sets the mood for spooky mystery, dark night with the rain falling and all this stuff, but also at the same time that synthesizer that shows there's wacky antics to come. Don't worry, folks, this ain't all serious. Does a brilliant job of setting the pace right from the beginning.
This I just want to shout out this soundtrack. This was like a must find for me for a long time, because this soundtrack was not available for the longest time. It was not, you were not able to get it. So now I don't just own it. I have 2 versions of it on vinyl.
Mondo did the pressing where each color correlates to a character, is that right?
Yeah, so Mondo did a version where they did 6 variants, each of the 6 colors, and I have the Professor Plum of that. But then I think it was Waxwork Records did a version, and they did a it might have been Enjoy the Ride that did it, but they did the Flames on the Side of My Face variant. That's an orange and red swirl mix thing. And so I was like, all right, I have to buy this too. What I'm still hoping somebody does eventually is they just release it on CD so that I can have like a high quality digital version of it, because ripping vinyl always is a bit
Is
of
this
a
not stream on streaming services?
no.
Oh.
It's nowhere. So like when somebody did the TMNT soundtracks, they also did them on CD. So I made a point to also buy them on CD so that I could have a high quality digital version. I do not believe Clue has ever gotten a CD release. The Enjoy the Ride, who I think did the second pressing I got, did a tape. They did a cassette tape, like a bunch of psychopaths.
It's not high quality at all.
Now, this is the opposite of high quality.
Andrew, did you select Professor Plum, or
Yes, I
did you?
did.
Was it okay? What made you pick Professor Plum?
It's purple.
Checks
Okay.
out.
Simple
Checks
enough.
out.
And it was in Mondo they were just solid colors. So it was just like it was either red, white, blue, green.
I don't know if
So
you
was
picked
like,
it based on your favorite character or whatever. I wish there was a Wadsworth. I was like a black and white swirl for his tuxedo.
That would be. I wouldn't mind that. That'd be cool. They might have done that. Yeah, because Wax Enjoy the Ride also did a version where they did like the God, what did they call? I don't know what you call it, but it was like a black and white. It was like a red and green swirl, or like a red and white swirl from Miss Scarlet. So everybody got their color in a white swirl version.
A swirl.
So that was cool, but the version I did was specifically different. It was the flames on the side of my face variant, and I was like, this is the best, and I had to have it, even though I already own it. I was like, all right, I guess this is where I exist now. So yeah, they did, actually looking at the page right now, so they did, all of the characters got a swirl that was there it was like green and white and purple and white and all of that. They still have some of these in stock. They still have the Mrs. Peacock, the Professor Plum, the Colonel Mustard, the Mr. Green, and the Miss Scarlet. So there was a black and clear split one that was wild with a splatter. There was a weapon split with splatter. Then the flames on the side of my face variant, which is this orange and yellow and white kind of weird mix. I was like, yeah, that's the version that I have to have. I it's like that needs to be in my life. So I bought that. So now I literally own this soundtrack twice.
You mentioned
that main title is
Real
what
good.
I wanted. Like that main title, like playing
in
during the credits. That's
in the
what I wanted.
documentary, actually, there is a mini second documentary on the Blu-ray just about the music for this movie, and it has a couple unused versions of that title track.
They're
on the vinyl. Okay,
they're on the vinyl.
It's very cool to be like, yeah, you know what? You're right. This is a little too in the spooky direction, or this is a little too in the comedy direction, and he found that middle ground.
Like, there's some that have there's like electronic drums on some of them. It's so weird. Like, it's such a weird thing. Like, it's the same theme, but then at some point these like electronic drums come in, and I'm like, no, this ain't Depeche Mode, brother. Like, don't get that out of here.
I get what
that's
they were going
John
for, but
Morris doing the music. Yeah. That was John Morris who did the music for this. He was very notable for also doing a lot of music for Mel Brooks. He did the music for The Producers, Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, Silent Movie, High Anxiety. Did a lot of stuff with Gene Wilder as well. So he kind of fit right into these proceedings, I think, because this definitely does feel like it's birthed out of that Mel Brooks, Gene Wilder vibe. Gene Wilder could have easily been, if we're recasting this movie at the same time, Gene Wilder is, I mean, could Gene Wilder be Wadsworth?
Yes.
I could see a Wadsworth.
Different, it's different. No one does like Tim Grimm, but I can see that. Here's my question for you, Andrew, as far as fantasy casting, because I know in my fantasy cast, whether it's 80s or 90s, Michael Keaton's in this movie. Who does Michael Keaton play?
In 1985 or 1995?
There's different answers, because if so, I
maybe
both of them.
I don't know.
85.
I think you could argue
Mr. Green.
That's why I would say.
That's kind of. But
yeah,
I would say Mr. Green is like the easiest one, but because Professor Plum, as much as I think he could do it, I don't think he gets any moments to stand out as Mr. Plum where he would as Mr. Green.
Yeah.
There's probably
real quick, I got to say this as I think of him because my brain will forget him. 90s version. Kelsey Grammer is Professor Plum. For 90s Clue.
Yeah. Yes, I can see that. And then David Hyde Pierce is Mr. Green. Just shock. It's just a Frasier reunion. No, Michael Keaton, I think, is Mr. Green is like the easiest thing. But like, there's a version where I think he plays maybe Colonel Mustard a little bit more manic, like because he's got that energy. But like some of the lines that Colonel Mustard delivers, I could easily see Michael Keaton doing. But yeah, Michael Keaton could definitely be. If we're recasting Clue at the same time, there's a spot for Michael Keaton.
If there's a 90s,
there's somebody, as one of the seven. If
there's a 90s Clue, I just kind of want to recast everyone in Wet Hot American Summer into roles in Clue, and I think we would get a successful film out of this.
We, Liz and I watch a show called Taskmaster a lot, which is a British kind of game show that, gathers 5 British comedians and they have to do a bunch of tasks and then they get scored on them. But it's all like British comedians and actors. And we had a whole thing where we were trying to figure out if we were casting Clue with people that had been on Taskmaster. And we ended up with like 3 options for every person because there's so many funny people. But because everybody's got like a kind of specific energy that you're looking for. And you got to kind of be. Like Michael Keaton, he could be Colonel Mustard, but his Colonel Mustard is not the same as Martin Mull's. And is that okay? Is it different? And that's the other thing. Like, do you cast the characters with different sensibilities and see what happens? But that's why it's fun.
Janine Garofalo is Mrs. White, Bob, for doing Wet Hot American Summer.
Thinking that makes the most sense.
Yeah.
Paul Rudd's a tough one because
Paul Rudd's a Wadsworth. He's a Wadsworth.
You've got David Hyde Pierce in Wet Hot American Summer to be Wadsworth, though. Like, he's right there.
But he can be Mr. Green.
He could also be Professor Plum. Like, he could be anything.
Now I want to fan cast this.
Interesting. This is the next 2 hours of this podcast is going to be all of our fantasy casting. No, this leads to a question, though. Like, normally, especially with, like, classics and movies that we hold in such high regard, we're disgusted at the idea of a remake. There's been numerous talks about trying to remake this movie or make another Clue.
Real quick, though. Christopher Maloney has to play the driver, though. He has to be... That's your point that the driver is Christopher Maloney. That's all
That's the guy from Law & Order.
That's the guy from Law & Order.
He plays the cop in Law & Order.
He's the cop from New York. You got there.
All right. Very good.
But remakes of Clue, or at least another version of Clue, is something that has been heavily discussed over the years.
I don't hate the idea. I think you've got a formula here that if it's handled right, you get the right cast, you can make a great version that doesn't obviously diminish or replace the original, has an updated cast. I would love to see it, again, fleshed out with not purely comedic actors. Get a few serious guys in there. God, I would love to see Robert Downey Jr. in an ensemble. He could be absolutely anybody up and down this. Like, it doesn't have to be someone only known for their comic chops, but I think there's just
get a Kristen Wiig to be Mrs. White or something. Like, I would love that.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Will Ferrell could do Wadsworth. I don't even love Will Ferrell, but I think he's got the right energy to play it straight and then flip into manic. I don't hate. There's very few ideas you could throw out there that I would hate it. I can.
So there were actually points where Ryan Reynolds was going to be in it.
That's the rumor I keep hearing.
There's a character Ryan Reynolds going to play. Jason Bateman apparently entered. I remember hearing his name attached to this at some point. All of that was literally like 5 or 6 years. It was like pre-COVID. It was
Game
a long
Night
time ago.
has a similar feel to this movie. Bob, have you seen Game Night?
I feel like I might have seen part of it on
Bateman,
Rachel McAdams. You should watch it. It's first off, it's absolutely hysterical. It's so funny.
Jesse Plimpton? What's it?
I think I actually might be thinking of a different neighbor. I'm thinking of Tag. Sorry. Totally off base there.
Different movie.
This is not Tag. Much better than Tag. Hashtag PP.
You would love Game Night.
You would love Game Night. Game Night is 100% up your alley. Please watch it. And then I remember James Bobbin, I think, was brought in to direct, and I like James Bobbin. He worked on the Ali G Show, Flight of the Conchords. Unfortunately, also directed Alice Through the Looking Glass. But I thought he's got comedic chops. Something like a guy that did Flight of the Conchords doing a Clue movie works for me 100%. There were some talks about the script. There was definitely things that were being worked on, and the screenwriter that had been mentioned was also super funny. He'd done stuff like The Lost City, which is that Sandra Bullock, Channing Tatum movie, which is absolutely hysterical. It was some decent talent kind of being courted for this Clue movie, and I was very interested, but nothing ended up happening with it. And then it sounded like, I think earlier this year, Hasbro was now kind of shopping I guess all the rights stuff lapsed, and they're kind of out there doing new stuff now. So, but I'm definitely in the camp of this concept is wide open enough to do more with. Like this is like it's one of those things where like you kind of have to remind people that at the end of the day it's a Clue movie. It's based off a board game. Like you know, you get people that'll kind of be like, oh well, you know, you can't touch Clue. I was like, well, first off, it's Clue, man. Like it's Clue. Like it's a board game adaptation, and it's, don't get me wrong, it's so good they never tried doing it again. I always joke about wanting a Hungry Hungry Hippos movie that's like a horror movie with like hippos as Jaws, because hippos are terrifying. Like, you know, hippos are absolutely horrifying, and just the idea of a movie where hippos are hunting people down, but calling it Hungry Hungry Hippos sounds very funny to me.
But the dramatic
sure.
line in the trailer, they're getting hungrier.
And then it just ends with the giant jaw clamping down on the camera.
Like 45 minutes ago, Bob said, okay, I've got 3 things, and we've gotten through one of them. So we're going to come back to it, but real quick, Jason Sudeikis as Mr. Body, because ever since I saw Colossal, I can only see him as an absolute jerk. Even though
Ted Lasso, I can't see him as Mr. Body.
I have not watched Ted Lasso.
I watched Ted Lasso, and he's a Mr. Green for me. Like Jason Sudeikis is a Mr. Green for me.
I was even thinking outside the box. What about like an Idris Elba as like a Colonel Mustard? Could that like? Because he's secretly pretty funny.
I'd be into that.
I think.
Oh,
he is.
It's
very funny.
Yeah. He's very.
I
funny.
think he can really pull something like that off. Like that pomp, but nothing to back it up. Like
I would definitely love for this to be like a Chris Hemsworth type moment, like Chris Hemsworth in Ghostbusters moment for someone, where you pull in somebody that you're kind of not expecting, and then they completely kill it. Like going into Ghostbusters, people were kind of like, hey, Chris Hemsworth, he's fine. And then like in that movie, people were like, oh, this guy's funny. Like he can be funny. And then Ragnarok kind of cemented it. Like I would very much love for at least one of the characters to be somebody like that. Like somebody who like isn't self-deprecating or like isn't known for being super funny, comes in and just absolutely kills it. Like I can't think of like who I would want to do that, because Idris Elba,
Daniel Day-Lewis.
Yes, Daniel Day-Lewis is Wadsworth. There
comes out of retirement to play Wadsworth.
To play Wadsworth, and then like he goes through and he plays it exactly the same. He does the manic, crazy run around at the end and everything.
He's been secretly living as a butler to be method about it for the last 8 years.
He's been buttling for 6 years now, preparing for Clue.
I'm locking in my personal.
He killed 6 people. Like he's gotten real prep for this.
I'm locking in my personal Mr. Green pick with Will Forte, my number one guy.
Of course you are.
It's good.
I have a left field for Professor Plum.
Okay.
Modern, current, a little aged, Zach Galifianakis.
That's interesting.
I don't.
He can give off that pompous, arrogant air, but there's just, we know there's just absurd goof underneath. It maybe not Professor Plum, but I love his work. I'd love to see him worked in here somewhere.
I don't hate it.
We'll have your people talk to my people.
Well,
we'll be able to work this out.
We will be
we'll see when we get there.
launching a Patreon,
Hasbro,
and 100% of the profits are going towards making this movie happen.
Hasbro, we're available. I know you're listening, so please, by all means, reach out. Let us know what you think. We're open to suggestions. Yeah. Well, it's so weird because you want to make analogs to this movie, and that's who you're kind of casting based off of. But if you're going to do it again, you would make it different.
You
would
want
it to be the same thing. You wouldn't want them to be the same character. Like, I like Idris Elba being I think Idris Elba's Colonel Mustard is like, that's what's in my head now. That's kind of what I want to watch. Just this idea that he's got this like respectable air of like the military service, but then there's this bumbling person underneath it. And I think he would be great at that. I think Idris Elba is very funny and could be extremely effective in a role like that. And like you can play with this a lot. And that's the beauty of it. Like your only premise is there's 6 suspects, 1 dead guy. That's the Agatha Christie, the old setup, the classic, and then there were none. One of us is the killer. And it's open to doing anything. And so you should and can do anything with it.
Kate Blanchett as Mrs. White. No, Mrs. Peacock.
Mrs. Peacock. Yes. I was
Mrs.
like,
Peacock.
I don't quite know about Mrs. White, but I can see that as Mrs. Peacock.
Scarlett Johansson could be Miss Scarlet.
She could.
Miss 2 on the nose, but okay.
Well, a little. Anyway, Bob, what are your other thoughts?
What was your number 2 on that list? Let's spend the next hour talking about that.
I'd be remiss if I didn't mention how good Shake, Rattle, and Roll and Shaboom Shaboom are in this movie. Fitting in,
Oh, yeah.
making those scenes that they're in iconically tied to that music. I will never hear the song without thinking of the scene, and I will never see the scene without thinking of the song. Like, they are just intrinsically linked in my mind forever. Absolutely beautiful. Also, the matte paintings of the mansion at the beginning. I know it's a very small detail, but like when they pull up, and great line again from Christopher Lloyd, where Miss Scarlet goes, "Why is the car stopped?" And he goes, "It's frightened." And they cut to the mansion, and the thunderbolt hits, and it lights up behind it. It's this absolutely gorgeous matte painting on glass that is really, really well done. That, like, especially on the 4K version, it's like even freeze frame it. It's
masterful.
Like unbelievably done.
Gorgeous, yeah, beautiful.
Did I have a third point here?
I have a few more lines I want to go through.
Please.
Too, so
I have more fantasy casting if we want to do that.
Well, I want to go through actual lines.
I'll happily do either.
I do love when during the Miss Scarlet ending when Wadsworth goes, "Frankly, Scarlet, I don't give a damn." Doing the old Gone with the Wind. I liked Mr. Green when he's like, "So it was you. I was going to expose you." And Wadsworth goes, "I know. So I chose to expose myself." And Colonel Mustard goes, "Please, there are ladies present." Professor Plum and Mrs. Peacock in the basement. And Professor Plum's like, "What are you afraid of? A fate worse than death?" And she's like, "No, just death. Isn't that enough?"
And as they're going down the stairs, like back against one staircase and back against the wall, so they could like look at each other the whole way down.
Yeah, so they can.
Brilliant.
Obviously, the recurring gag throughout the movie, to make a long story short, too late. That is a gag that me and my family have used for a great many years. But he was your second husband. Your first husband also disappeared, but that was his job. He was an illusionist. But he never reappeared. He wasn't a very good illusionist.
Brilliant.
The rapid fire dialogue in so many of these scenes, there's just so much buried in all of them. And it's unbelievable. It's so good.
Andrew, you mentioned the idea of like someone who's known for their serious work being cast in a movie like this to show off the chops, like Chris Hemsworth in Ghostbusters. And I've been trying to find the perfect modern actor that would fit that mold and benefit from it. Like, Chris Evans comes to mind, but he's already really made fun of his image almost as much as he's developed it. He's pretty funny. So an actor that I associate with very serious work that I don't think has done anything outright comedic, Cillian Murphy.
I'm into it.
I would love to see him.
Into it.
Yeah. Try to stretch a little bit. Try to make us laugh. The Keith Stanfield, another huge career that has had a little more comedic moments, but I could see elevating something like this. So again, Hasbro, we're here. We can spit out 50 actors that we want you to cast, and if that's beneficial for you,
I got 2 more
money.
fantasy castings because now this is the only thing in my brain.
God.
Randall Park as Mr. Green, I think would be really good.
Wonderful.
And
yes.
Maya Rudolph as Miss Peacock, because Maya Rudolph needs to be in.
I love that.
She absolutely does. I think about this. You could and it's
Sam Rockwell as Mr. Body.
Ooh, do that.
I like Sam Rockwell in the movie. I don't know about him as Mr. Body though. Like, I like Sam Rockwell in the movie. I don't know about him as Mr. Body. I think he deserves more to work with.
He plays skeezy. Okay, but fair.
But yeah,
I think he has. He
does
skis.
have a good skis too.
He does. Do not misunderstand me. After seeing The Substance, I would say Dennis Quaid is Mr. Body, but I don't really want to cast him in more things. But he is so. I don't know if you people out there have seen The Substance, but Dennis Quaid is so. Like, if you told me The Substance was Dennis Quaid auditioning to be Vince McMahon, I wouldn't have thought you were lying.
Okay.
I would not. It's that it's that skeezy. It doesn't go like that deep, but like he's just so unlikable and so gross, and you're just like, oh. But I do like Sam Rockwell in the movie. I think I want him in it, but I don't know that Mr. Body is the part. And again, we're still treating this like these guys are playing the same characters from before, which is not what you'd do, I assume. You'd go a different way
shot
with
for
it.
shot remake, like the 90s Psycho. Do a shot for shot.
Because the whole premise of the book is... Well, the game, obviously, you don't know why they killed Mr. Body. It's just that they did kill Mr. Body. And there's been plenty of... there was a series of books for a great many years that I remember reading as a kid that were Clue books.
Oh, yeah.
And they were there was 3 or 4 stories in them. And the story was always somebody killing Mr. Body for a variety of different reasons. And the whole idea was that the clues were in the story and you were supposed to figure it out. And I remember reading those with my mom, and we'd try to figure out who killed Mr. Body and do all this stuff. And so you've got literally six. So
you can do your entire. It's highly different motive. Like they don't need. You drop the entire blackmail.
You could drop the blackmail thing and literally have it that the 6 people all have their own motivation, completely unrelated for killing Mr. Body. There's been versions where it's like this weird group of friends that they all are, and they kill Mr. Body because for some unrelated reason. It's literally the basest of concepts that you could do, and you can make it funny. You could make it. Not that I would suggest doing this. You could make it like a deadly serious murder mystery movie. Like you really could, because the simple base concept is so simple. As simple as murdering someone is. But
sure.
That we're all familiar with.
Bob, thank you for this gift that you have brought us. Obviously, we were big fans of the movie already, but it was just such a joy to talk about it with someone else who's super passionate about it. You and Andrew can duke it out for who's Clue fan number 1, but it was certainly a good time, and I see many a group message coming up of the perfect ideal fantasy cast that we will continue to all think about and obsess over and come up with. But thank you so much for being here, and please tell the lovely people listening where else they can hear your lovely voice. What you got going on?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. I feel like I'm breaking a record every time I'm on this show of longest episode of this show. But if that's my cross to bear, then dang it, here we are. I love this movie, so being able to nerd out with you guys about it is just a joy, truly. And if people aren't sick of hearing me yet, I got a podcast, 99 Questions, that I'm very, very proud of. Still kicking, still going strong. It's an interview podcast. I have been very lucky to have some really great people on recently. James and Elise Willems from Funhouse, Ross Bryant and Raphael Chastain from Dropout. If there's some Dropout College Humor fans in the house. Nick Weiger from Doughboys, Arasha from Smosh, some great people in the gaming world, Imran Khan, Liana Rupert, Mason Madden from MXM, the wrestler, was on not too long ago. You could go back and listen to the Sam Reich or Brendan Lee Mulligan if you're in that realm. I'm having a ball doing that and getting to talk to people I really respect their work for, and I think it's a pretty decent show, I dare say.
It's a wonderful show, Bob. I love the premise. It is so genius. I mean, the curated list of questions is just the perfect basis for a good time, a good interview, and you're always going to discover something about the person you're talking to that isn't exclusive to your podcast. Like I know Brendan Lee Mulligan's podcast episode really blew up for you. I mean, I see it talked about like everywhere, and you got some stories out of the guy that have like never been told previously, which is so cool. And if there were a dinner party and everyone that was ever a guest of 99 Questions attended, boy, that would be a party to attend. Like the eclectic group that you have managed to get on your show is truly astounding, and I love it, and continue to get amazed by these people that you bring in, Bob.
Well, thank you a lot. That is very high praise coming from you guys. But now I'm going to fantasy cast my guests as
Bob. I didn't say anything.
Andrew hates your show. I've got to talk him into you being on the show every single time.
And justifiably so. Of course.
Thank you guys for the kind words. Andrew said nothing. I've done nothing. No, so I will take this moment to say that, Bob, I am always happy when you come on the show. Any time Chris says, hey, we got Bob for this episode, I know it's going to be a blast. I know you're out there doing good work with great stuff. So now we both have said kind words. So now you're not lying when you say we both said nice things.
No,
got the Andrew compliment. We're good. We're good.
We got them both on there. Yeah. Again, go back. Also, if you're listening to this, drop your fantasy castings as an Apple Podcast review on Best of the Rest.
I like this.
Put your fantasy castings in there. I think that's a fair way to do it. Leave a 5-star and say who you want to be Mrs. White and Mrs. Peacock and all them. I think it would be a joy. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go home and sleep with my wife.
We are podcasting with positivity.
Well, Andrew, talk about an easy day at the office, huh? We get
No kidding.
sit back and talk about one of your favorite films. Of course, a movie I love dearly as well. Thanks once again to Bob for bringing that to the show. And this month is just getting started. Andrew, if you look at my hand here, this is me miming holding up something on a podcast. Another gift has arrived. So I say next week, let's you and I meet back here and see what this gift has in store for us. What do you say?
Sounds good to me, brother.
We will continue, of course, tracking and shaming your holiday decorating, your gift wrapping, your eggnog trying. That will continue each week until we see results. You understand?
Nothing says the holidays like bullying Andrew into being more cheerful.
That's what I'm here for, buddy.
A ghost is going to show. You're going to get a visit from a ghost. You keep this up, Chris.
Come
that
back.
Ghost's going to be like, you need to work harder.
Come back next week. See what this gift is. And just until then, remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song, and a special thanks to Brittany Rashal for singing our special holiday version of our theme song. Thank you to Mitch for the music. You can check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. Check our show notes for that SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That's the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTR Cast. Thank you. But on this rewatch, I think the one that I want to highlight as my favorite is the first time all of the characters go to the study. Wadsworth is like, let's go to the study. Everything will be explained.
Hey, Chris, real quick. Work just called me. I need to step out and take it. I'm just going to let you guys keep talking while I do that. And I'll just slide back in when it's ready.
Okay.
You guys have this well in hand. I have no worries.
Okay.
I'll be right back.
Fucking Andrew. Always ruining.
Put down a timestamp.